The young adventurer Gran stands in the dungeon. Sword drawn, he activates the physical enhancement skill, preparing for the hunt. He stands before a formidable wyvern and feels that this is the perfect chance to test his skills against such a dangerous creature. With a sharp lunge, he rushed forward and plunged the sword deep into the creature's flesh to finish it off. The monster collapsed, its life fading, and he stands over it silently watching the outcome of the battle. He takes out a special tool and skillfully collects materials from the fallen monster. A heavy dull thud of the carcass hitting the ground signaled the end of the harvest and left him with the spoils of his victory. Thinking about his situation, he realizes. He joined the group temporarily to take the vacant spot precisely in that part of the dungeon teeming with monsters. A companion shouted, confirming that his part was already done, and urged him to gather everything faster so they could move on. He raised the blade, a metallic click echoed in the cave, and he prepared to see the matter through to the end. The dungeon was merciless over time. The accumulation of magic decomposed the remains of the fallen, and they simply vanished into the ether. To avoid this loss, he worked precisely and efficiently, gathering valuable materials from the monster before it could dissolve. The companions looked at him with a mixture of surprise and realization. He turned out to be not just a porter, but a skilled traveler of B rank. They pondered their business and quietly admitted, a porter is usually a person of lower rank, taken only to carry things, not to fight. He joined the team, saying he would both fight and support. But in real combat, he proved so effective that he began to exceed their initial expectations. The truth was that the members of his squad were so infinitely strong that he had nothing left to do but gather loot. One of them asked why he did not engage in battle, and he only gave a crooked smile, acknowledging the irony of his situation. He stood firm, his figure sharply standing out against the doubts of his comrades, who did not believe that a low-ranking porter could be useful in the heat of battle. Ignoring their doubts, he took up the task, skillfully preparing food while the others watched, still puzzled by his unusual role. When the aroma filled the air, he assured them that the meat was ready and asked them to be patient while he finished cooking. They talked about what each wanted, and when one of the companions asked for dessert, he quickly and deftly set the table for their dinner. He moved with refined ease, gently seating the people gathering around. For a moment, their previous tension melted away. The group watched in fascination as he took things out of the pouch, and thinking it was a magic bag, they were mistaken, and he silently decided not to correct them. In fact, he relied on a special storage skill, using a simple pouch as a decoy to hide the true nature of his abilities from curious eyes. He continued cooking, thinking about the decision to hide his rare talents and quietly agreeing to play the role of a humble porter, at least for now. He carefully seasons the mixture, adding milk, salt, pepper, and nutmeg to the bowl with the precision that practice has given him. With a calm, confident hand, he cracks fresh eggs into the mixture, fully focused on the preparation. The raw egg slid into the bowl and instantly melted among the other ingredients. He kneads the mixture, and pondering, he sees how most adventurers settle for bland factory rations, but he knows, putting in a little effort to cook a real dish is worth it. His companions look on with distrust, not understanding how a group of their level can afford such a luxurious meal deep in the dungeon. One of them joked that he is in the company not so much because of his rank, but because he raises the level of their meals. He continues working because he knows, although restoring dry rations takes time, it is worth it. The taste and result are much better than any other option. He realizes that by using the stash skill to carry fresh ingredients and kitchen utensils, he can avoid the torment of tasteless food, all while hiding his true abilities in plain sight. He serves the freshly grilled steak to his companions, encouraging them to eat their fill and saying that good food keeps the fighting spirit. The group greedily devours the dishes, their faces glowing with delight. They call for seconds, clearly impressed by the quality of this treat. One of the companions says that this food is better than any in the local taverns, and that his presence is true luck for their stomachs. He brushed off the praise with a modest smile, saying he is just a growing young man with a big appetite who loves to cook for everyone. When they finished the main course, he surprised them even more by placing a freshly baked pie on the table, a sweet finale to their meal. The friends settled in to enjoy the dessert. Warmth and sincere friendship prevailed at the table. He mentally tries on this role, believing that his ability to handle these tasks is the perfect cover for his true status as a rank B adventurer. The next day he comes to the Adventurers Guild, and from there comes a familiar voice calling him by name. Suddenly a friend approached him, apologized for his previous rudeness, sincerely thanked him for the food, and promised to strive to achieve rank B. The young man politely and encouragingly said goodbye, assuring his comrade that they would definitely catch up with him soon. As they parted, they recalled the dinner once more. The steak was excellent, but the real value was in the friendship they shared. He was pleased to receive an official invitation to their party, but he politely declined, saying that for now he wanted to keep all options open. Alone again, he pondered his path. He liked cooperation, but the constraints of a permanent team conflicted with his personal goals. He walked to the guild with a firm intention to find another life, one that did not revolve solely around others' expectations. When he arrived, his gaze caught an announcement about housing, and suddenly, a new idea about the future sparked in his mind. Suddenly, he realized that he could combine the work of an adventurer with peaceful rural life, and finally begin to live the quiet life he had secretly created. He finally fulfilled his dream. Thanks to hard work and savings, he bought a quiet house far from the bustling capital. Here, away from prying eyes, he freely pursues his hobbies and hones his skills at his own pace, and with a calm smile opens the status menu, ready to embrace the slow life he long desired. The young man thoughtfully recalls the past, realizing that it holds memories of another life before he began his journey in this new world. He remembers his past life in a country called Japan, a place completely different from the reality he now finds himself in. In his past life, he lived quite ordinarily and found solace in simple pleasures playing video games. He recalls how he cherished those peaceful days without the dangers of magic or monsters, where he could immerse himself in virtual worlds. Memories of his previous life are still vivid within him, sharply contrasting with his current life as an adventurer, where he personally monitors his status and inventory. 5 years have passed since he was born in this world, and suddenly his mind is flooded with a huge wave of information from his previous life. He wakes up in bed, the echoes of those memories not yet faded as he stirs from sleep. With quiet determination, he decides to test his new reality and quietly issues the command to open the status screen. He gazes fascinated at the glowing interface, his eyes widening as the numbers of his strength, defense, and magic materialize before him. Scanning the lines of the display, he notices level 11 and looks at the health and stamina bars, showing what he is physically capable of now. It dawns on him, in this world, you can literally see your stats and gifts. It is a real, tangible thing. On the screen, his title hero shines brightly, and it sharply contrasts with his modest expectations. He feels the weight of his father's words, which drove him to defeat the Demon King, a fate he never imagined for his ordinary life. Clenching his fists, he feels a surge of determination, his heart pounding with anticipation of the path ahead. He dives into memories of life and thinks, isn't it a sign that he is destined for something greater, perhaps even to become the main hero of a great story? Despite uncertainty due to his weak gift, he goes to the fields with other village children and begins practical training, hunting, and gathering, which will nurture his future. He watched as comrades effortlessly displayed skills as soon as they took up weapons, and felt how sharply this contrasted with his own struggle to find a place among them. The realization hit him in the face. While others moved forward, his development was frozen, and the ability to wield magic was still unattainable. When his friends began easily casting spells, he could only watch, disappointed by his inability to replicate their success, no matter how hard he tried. Checking the status screen only deepened the mystery. Mana and magical power were extremely high, yet he could not cast a single spell at all. By the age of 10, he was just average, watching others surpass him in development, and this left him with a feeling of insecurity. He carried unspoken disappointment, felt the heavy burden of his hero status, and desperately sought even the slightest tangible progress. Looking at the quiet village, he pondered the peaceful life, which so sharply contrasted with the expectations placed upon him. Even the monsters in the neighboring forest seemed just a part of nature, no challenge to test his true abilities. He gazes into the vast landscape, pondering the distant demon kingdom where a mighty ruler reigns over the land. In the bustling town, he observes people busy with their daily lives and notices that trade and human encounters are common here as well. As he wanders, one question troubles his mind: what truly defines a hero? But he understands such philosophical doubts have long become irrelevant. He thinks about legends of heroes gifted with multiple weapons and magical gifts, dismissing loud tales of saving the world. This is not his path. Walking through the village, he recalls how he decided to join the guild. He was driven not by some grand heroic destiny, but by a simple, concrete reason. He focuses on his unique gift, the Explorer, which allows him to store and manage an endless variety of items in a vast, tangible space. This ability is like a virtual warehouse created specifically to neatly store and protect inanimate objects, plants, and microorganisms. When his mana capacity increased, he realized he could hold even more, and since then he spends time hunting monsters and gathering materials to fill his supplies and hone his skill in using his gift. He continues to systematically collect, using his unique storage skill to organize every part of a monster and every resource he obtains in the dungeon. He is wildly pleased by the sheer quantity of materials. He happily watches his list grow with hundreds of wolf fangs, rabbit pelts, and horns. A deep calm envelops him. Gathering these treasures soothes his soul. In quiet moments, he realizes that the path to gather and build suits him much more than the life of a typical hero. Having secured everything he needed, he sets his sights on a new goal, heading to the settlement to finally use his collection. He stretched, deciding that if he wants to master production skills, he must strive for the peak of craftsmanship, not just wander aimlessly. Arriving at the bustling market, he listens to a local who says, "Traders from other cities come here, offering rare and valuable finds." His eyes lit up when he saw the variety of goods on the stalls. He can't wait to find out what treasures he can buy to improve his craft. He returned to his companion and asked how things were going at the market today. She nodded. The bazaar is so big there are few people, so she left the shop to the seller. Walking among the noisy stalls, he realized that studying the market is an important and valuable part of his work. They stopped by a trader who said his goods came from a distant eastern land. He looked over the stall and noticed that most had already been sold, but a few interesting trinkets remained. His gaze caught on a tray of small round objects, and when asked if he recognized them, he recalled reading about them in a book. They were Sorobosos. Deciding to buy, he asked with interest if the dark liquid in the bottle was also from the eastern lands. The trader handed him a sample and warned that the smell was quite sharp. He carefully sniffed. The aroma was indeed strong and began bargaining over the price of that mysterious substance. After a few minutes, he learned that the merchant had purchased the goods from a trader from the islands and sincerely thanked him for this information. While they were discussing the origin of that liquid, the merchant suggested, if he searched further, he might find it in the port town of Overlow in the east of the kingdom of Sarandel. He gives coins to the merchant for a tiny pouch of seeds, and hiding the purchase, cannot get rid of the thought about the true nature of the seeds of the Rion fruit he just bought. Examining his new acquisitions, he excitedly reflects on the fact that rice products also occur in this world. The fact that Sasa's sake is here seems to confirm a connection with memories of his past life and makes him wonder what the appearance of such familiar pleasures in this land will lead to. He imagined that somewhere there are others with the same memories of a world similar to his, and asked himself whether their paths would ever cross. With a clear purpose in his heart, he set off eastward, hoping to find ingredients that would remind him of home. His companion noticed the things he had bought, looked at them with interest, and asked what they were for. He began to explain what these items were, noticing that she was unfamiliar with them. He introduced the abacus, vividly demonstrating how it works as a tool for complex calculations. She stood enchanted by the device, and he smiled and said, "If we don't find a craftsman who can make it, I will make it myself." She shone with excitement and was eager to learn to use it as soon as possible to ease her work as a trader, and he remained confident that they could create it. He drew attention to soy sauce and sake, enthusiastically explaining their special properties and all the interesting ways to use them in the kitchen. He continues the conversation, tirelessly amazed at how such a young person can have so much knowledge about the world, and she sincerely admires his life experience. He explains that he only traveled for local supplies, but deep down secretly dreams of setting off to distant lands and discovering new horizons as a merchant. She looked up at him, surprised by his sudden proposal, saying that if she ever wanted to travel far from home, she would need a guard. He smiles confidently and reassures her, saying that as a traveler he can easily protect her on any future journeys. Grusha settles in to enjoy grilled kebabs, savoring every bite while their conversation remains light and carefree. He pulls out a ticket for the raffle and explains that it is a gift from the trade guild for shopping in their store. They had agreed in advance to go to the raffle tent right after lunch, eagerly waiting to see what they would win. He watches her eat with appetite, saying that a traveler needs to keep their strength, and she sincerely admits that she envies his ability to enjoy such a variety of food. He finishes eating and offers the rest to his companion, but she insists that she is already full and satisfied. The couple makes their way to the back of the establishment, their footsteps echoing loudly as they approach the entrance. As soon as they arrived, they were greeted by a smiling woman with a basket. She warmly welcomed them, as if they were family, and kindly offered to lead them to the warehouse. He finally shows the huge, heavy creature he had been carrying on his back the whole time, and the woman gasps in surprise. A heavy silence hung in the air. The woman stands, stunned by the colossal size of the beast he brought. She looks admiringly at his strength and thinks that such power is only within the reach of high-ranking adventurers, while he modestly explains that it is just an ordinary skill of enhancing the body. He confirmed that the cargo has not yet been unloaded, and she immediately led him to the back door to complete the delivery. Finally, they put down the heavy burden. It slid across the floor, and the weight lifted from his shoulders. He grabs a knife and begins to cut the carcass, saying that he will take the tongue, tail, and hind part as payment for the work, because the merchant did not need those parts. His companion, with an interested look, asks if bones are also considered valuable materials. He explains that the tongue has a special texture and taste, the tail is perfect for soups, and the bone is an excellent base for broths. While they work, she notices how much he knows about cooking, and he smiles and says that life on the road often forces one to learn how to cook any monster meat that comes along. When the carcass is skillfully divided into portions, she looks with surprise at the huge amount of meat they got from that creature. He sees a simple but sharp problem. So much fresh meat, it either needs to be eaten quickly or urgently figured out how to preserve it before it spoils. He suggests smoking the meat, says it is excellent provision for the road and perfectly suits a drink. She agrees with the plan with a smile and invites him to stay for dinner, offering to use some fresh meat for their meal. He enthusiastically offers to cook a steak, explaining to his companion that the piece is tender and lightly cooked. Discussing the cuisine, he suggests adding thin slices of garlic for flavor, and she gladly agrees. Recalling his past, he does not hesitate at all to start cooking, especially now that he has such select ingredients. He begins to cook, skillfully slicing the meat while the frying pan heats up. The butter is already melting and starting to sizzle. Garlic slices sizzled against the hot frying pan, and a heady aroma rose from the butter as they began to brown. Watching him fuss, she admits, the hunger only intensifies, but she tries to remain patient while he cooks. He again turns his gaze to the thick raw piece of meat and prepares it for the final seasoning. With a calm, confident hand, he makes precise cuts in the meat so that it cooks evenly. He finishes the preparation by seasoning the meat with salt and pepper. It is ready for the hot frying pan. He watches the steak sizzle in the pan, the aroma filling the air, and tells his friends that the dish will be ready in a moment. Turning to the others, he called for help with the final preparations, and the boy eagerly jumped into the fray. He thoughtfully reflects on the nuances of cooking. Everyone has their preferences regarding how well the meat should be cooked, and he himself prefers medium rare. With a flourish, he pours thick sauce over the sizzling meat. The delicious aroma makes the boy look at the pan with wide eyes in admiration. The finished dish, a perfectly cooked black buffalo steak, is served at the table, and he finally invites them to start eating. They take the first bites on their faces. Expectation instantly changes to genuine surprise. The dish turned out to be surprisingly tasty. He sits down with them at the table, they share the meal, and all enjoy what he has prepared. Kerchai, pleasantly surprised, says that the black buffalo meat is surprisingly tender. She expected a completely different, much tougher texture. She savors the dish, and her face lights up with pleasure as she enjoys the flavors the Grandmaster prepared. He explains that the dark seasoning, when heated, releases an appetizing aroma, and although it has a distinctive smell, it strangely pairs well with garlic. When asked where the ingredients come from, he honestly says, he knows what the components are, but cooking like this is too much trouble, especially now when soy is scarce. He thinks that this seasoning could revolutionize the local cuisine, so he begins to consider asking merchants or the trade guild where to get more. Looking back, he recalls how he fruitlessly searched the capital for this, and decided that today's find was simply a lucky accident. She notes this product comes from the far east of the kingdom of Shuren. The journey there would take at least a month. They gaze at the horizon and excitedly wonder whether to embark on a long expedition to distant lands beyond, where they might find those exotic goods. He immediately dismisses the idea of asking for help from that particular mage who can teleport. Obviously, this person arouses his distrust. He sighed heavily, looked at the dishes, and decided that all plans for a long journey could wait. Having just settled into a new home, he just wanted to rest a little. When the morning light seeped into the room, he and his friends sat silently at the table, and the calm outside the window sharply contrasted with the burden of upcoming tasks. Later, while he was bathing to clear his head, he discussed the logistics of their next steps, focusing on preparing the necessary items, potions, and special rings for the upcoming tasks. After finishing the urgent matter, he said goodbye to them and was already thinking that he needed to brew more potions, and just in case, add protective spells to the equipment. Deep in the dense emerald forest begins the quiet life of an adventurer. He kneels among the thickets, enchanted by the abundance of rare ingredients, and fully indulges in the joys of his slow life. After harvesting, he reviews his supplies. There are enough ingredients for potions, but he is tempted to gather a little more. Standing alone in the forest, he quietly contemplates his path and with an uncertain heart asks himself, would he have remained a recluse in this forest if he had never crossed paths with Kercha? The memory brings a gentle smile to his face. Meeting her immediately after arrival turned everything upside down. His stomach growls. He decides it is time to gather ingredients for a hearty stew and shift his attention from alchemy to dinner. Behind the trees sprawls the town of Pemad, a quiet settlement under the control of the local discount. Although far from the royal capital, the town has become a bustling hub on the border road, attracting a constant flow of travelers and goods. He watches the noisy Pemad, an important trading hub in the border city. Monsters lurk nearby, so the local adventurers guild is indispensable here. Searching for something to eat, he gladly agreed to the dish of the day at the tavern. His eyes lit up at the suggestion. They bring the dish steaming hot, fragrant wild boar stew, promising a truly hearty satisfaction. He takes a full spoonful, savoring the rich, tender texture that melts on the tongue, and a genuine smile of pleasure blooms on his face. With each unhurried bite, he pleasantly marvels at how deep the flavor of this simple tavern dish is. He thinks with pleasant surprise how unexpectedly tasty the dish was. The fat perfectly melted and soaked into the meat, making it tender. After finishing the bowl, he politely thanked for the service. Stepping out again into the daylight, he headed to the Adventurers Guild branch in Piemonte. He enters the quiet hall. His appearance announces the start of business within the guild walls. He approached the guild receptionist and asked to officially register this city as his new base of operations. The woman at the desk shuddered in shock. Her eyes widened as she confirmed his beer status. She explained that their branch lacked high-ranking adventurers, so his arrival was a real salvation for them. He modestly lowered expectations, saying he had just arrived and was not yet looking for big tasks. The receptionist advised that once he settled into his new life and felt ready, he could take on rank C or B requests. He chuckled quietly at her persistence, and she continued to press him with hope in her eyes. He glanced at the bulletin board and mentally estimated that he would look through what was there when he was truly ready to start work. Having finished his business, he stepped over the guild's threshold and found himself among the bustling city streets. He glanced at the person behind the reception, slid a small pile of coins across the counter, and asked to change his base. He explains the difference. The adventure rank is earned through proven skill and experience, while the merchant rank is determined simply by the sum of entrance and annual guild fees. He examined the guild board, and with relief noticed that his trading level was the lowest, so he would have to pay only a very small amount. His eyes stopped on a notice on the board: those who want to open a stall at the future market must submit an application at the reception. He approaches the counter again and says he wants to apply for a spot at the bazaar. The staff gladly agree. Walking away, he thinks about preparation. He already has supplies and fresh vegetables for daily use, and the thought of his own stall brings a genuine smile. Suddenly he stops, a look of anxiety appears on his face. He senses a disturbance in the distance and wonders if some large monster is causing trouble. He decides to investigate, tightens his gear, and prepares to check what is happening near the main road. He made his way through dense thickets, all his senses heightened, and finally the source of the disturbance appeared before him. In front of him stood a great boar and a rock python, both formidable beasts. He noticed that valuable materials could be taken from them and that they could become food. Drawing his blade, he directed energy into his body, enhancing strength and endurance, preparing for the inevitable fight. Two monsters met with a glance. Their predatory eyes wavered for a moment as soon as he stepped onto their territory. With a sudden burst of speed, he broke into the thick of the battle. His sword struck with a precise and powerful blow. The strike thundered through the earth, and the serpent collapsed. Its massive body finally froze thanks to him. Shifting his attention to the last beast, he took a fighting stance, his eyes fixed on every movement of the huge boar. The final blow struck with a dull, heavy thud, and the forest once again froze in silence. The threat was gone. He exhales, the blade gleams, wiping from the gear traces of the recent skirmish. With one swift move, he hides the weapon. The steel instantly disappears into his inventory. He turns his gaze to the carriage nearby. His heart tightens. Could its passengers have ended up under crossfire? Hearing noise in the covered cart, he loudly calls, looking for the coachman. He decides to investigate further and suggests, if the driver fled, the nearest vicinity must be searched. He finds an unconscious boy on the ground. Checking the pulse, he realizes the child is alive, probably thrown from the carriage during the chaos. He returns to the carriage and carefully places the boy inside so that he is safe and protected. He approaches the horse, wondering if he can drive the carriage himself. He drove the carriage away from the site of the clash, the wheels thumping on the uneven road and the sun slowly dipping toward the horizon. The young traveler suddenly stirred. His eyes snapped open in panic when he realized he was no longer alone, and he shouted, raising alarm for his cargo. He calmly and confidently reassured the boy, explaining that the monsters had already been dealt with and that they were already on the way to payment, arriving before nightfall. The boy could not believe his eyes. How could an ordinary passerby defeat such a huge and terrifying beast? He reluctantly brushed off the praise, shrugged. The creature was large but not as dangerous as it seemed, and the boy sincerely thanked him for the rescue. When the boy tried to shift his weight, a sharp cry of pain escaped him. His body still ached after the carriage accident. He immediately reached into his backpack, took out a healing potion, and handed it to the wounded boy to ease his pain. The boy took the vial, and learning that it was a special potion for external use only, once again sincerely thanked his rescuer for the unexpected kindness. He calls himself Kerchai, says he helps his parents in their shop in payment, and sincerely asks his rescuer to come with him there to properly thank him and pay for the medicine. Surprised, the boy asks if the potion is really made from herbs gathered around the house, to which his companion modestly replies that it is just a simple mixture. When he realized that the medicine was homemade, he froze. His eyes widened because he could not comprehend how simple their origin was. Unable to contain his excitement, he insists that his companion must definitely stop by the store. He desperately wants to discuss matters and somehow repay that kindness. The cart rattled along the path, and the merchant explained that he wanted to discuss business with the adventurer. He turned to his young companion and asked if he was currently at the end. The boy gaped in surprise upon learning that the merchant actually lived in a house deep in the neighboring forest. They discussed the nature of the forest, and the merchant said that although monsters swarm there, it is also rich in ingredients for potions. This interested the adventurer. The trader plaintively complained that his elderly mother, who had long run the pharmacy, recently closed the shop, and now there is a shortage of potions. He sighed heavily and explained how difficult it is to obtain supplies from neighboring towns. It is expensive and there are constant delivery problems. When they approached the destination, the traveler cautiously agreed to listen to the merchant's proposal, but only if the terms suited him. They reached the store where a woman was already waiting for them, ready to discuss the future of their trade. She enters the Pasero store and loudly exclaims that she has returned, while the evening light fades. Seeing her, the boy rushed forward, frightened by monsters on the road. But she calmed him down, explaining that a great adventurer helped her safely reach the shot. A new woman steps forward. She calls herself Alicia, Kirch's sister, and sincerely thanks Grant for intervening in time. Alicia gently asked the boy to wait inside while she prepared to unload the supplies, adding that it is dangerous for a woman to travel alone. He insists on carrying the heavy load, feeling strong like a true traveler, although the boy jokingly notes that he is too eager to help a pretty woman. In the shop, he apologizes for the interference, but Alicia insists that given the nature of this work, his help is truly invaluable. She politely thanks him again for his kindness to her sister, and her words convey sincere gratitude. The conversation turns to the reward. She offers him money or anything from the shop that catches his eye. She caught every word he said as he spoke about just arriving in these lands and not yet deciding on a trade, though he even considered joining the merchant guild. He threw out the idea to set up a stall at the market or maybe rent a corner in her shop and sell his goods on commission. Surprised by the proposal, she even recoiled in shock, but he quickly explained that he would gladly accept payment in the form of that potion they had talked about earlier. She decisively rejected his offer and said she preferred to buy his potions wholesale rather than just give him a place to sell. He admitted that he had never run a real business before, so the idea that his goods would be sold in her shop became a desirable opportunity for him. She seizes the moment and asks if he really knows how to brew potions himself. Her eyes widened with disbelief. She did not believe that he could brew high-quality elixirs at all. It was hard for her to reconcile his image as an adventurer with the skills of an alchemist. She insisted that he demonstrate his ability to evaluate potions. She was eager to immediately check the quality of his work. She carefully examines the vials and does not hide her admiration. The quality is much higher than that of her usual supplier, so she asks him to enter into a formal business agreement with her. He explains, although mass production is difficult, he can maintain a steady supply. He clarifies the local needs. Ordinary healing potions are in greater demand than high-quality ones, and simple antidotes are needed constantly. She gave Kircha the task of preparing the necessary papers for the contract to finally formalize their partnership. Smiling, she suggests getting down to resolving the specific details of the agreement. The sun slowly sets over the quiet building, and this is the beginning of their new adventure. In the shop, he thoughtfully considered the local needs. The residents of Piedmont primarily sought potions for travelers. He gets to work and immerses himself in preparing inexpensive, wildly demanded restorative elixirs to meet the town's needs. He looked around the quiet outskirts and noticed there were no powerful monsters here, so local adventurers greatly needed inexpensive, ordinary potions. Remembering this, he firmly decided to prioritize economy, striving to squeeze the maximum quality out of what he could afford. He was preparing for the task focused and determined, tidying up his workspace. The ingredients lay on the table. Healing herbs like euro and mallow, alongside magical stones, everything needed for the potion he was about to brew. He thoughtfully studied how his disassembly skill worked. Simple things broke down easily, while complex materials required more effort, and he noticed it did not affect living creatures. He began grinding the materials, pouring his magic into the mortar until the mixture became homogeneous, like a paste. Although he did not know how to cast spells, it turned out he skillfully infused magic into the water, carefully stirring the herbal paste into the enchanted liquid to make the mixture uniform. After boiling the mixture for an hour, he let it cool, then carefully poured the finished potion into smaller bottles. He thoughtfully reflects on the subtleties of his craft. The quality of the potion entirely depends on the condition of the ingredients and how precisely he infuses his magic into it. Focused, he skillfully synthesizes high-quality healing potions, watching the ingredients transform under his skilled hand. Noticing the remaining materials, he decides to put the creature's meat to use and fry it. He carefully cuts the carcass and notes. Although the bones are large and bulky, the meat is quite manageable and easy and safe to process. As soon as the meat is ready, he generously seasons it with salt and pepper and allows time to enhance the flavor. Then he kneads the dough from flour and eggs, enjoying a refreshing sip of ale while the dish cooks. Having chosen a garnish, he takes a knife and begins cutting the potatoes into convenient pieces, ones that can be eaten in a single bite. He finishes, soaks the potatoes in water and heats the oil, ready to bring his dish to perfection. He carefully breaded the monster meat in flour, making sure each piece is perfectly prepared, and only then lowers it into the shimmering hot oil. The meat sizzles. He watches as a golden crust forms on it, and with every appetizing aroma filling the kitchen, his impatience grows. When the frying is done, he places the dish on a plate and admires the crispy texture of the monster meat, now ready to serve. He lifts a piece, blows on it to cool the steam, and hesitantly but eagerly takes a bite. The taste is a true revelation. The meat is dense and at the same time juicy, and the spices perfectly emphasize that unique appeal that makes you want more and more. He dips another piece into vinegar. The sharp sourness wonderfully complements the fatty dish and his mug of beer. Satisfied with his culinary success, he considers sharing the treat. Just then a young guest enters the house. He turns to greet the boy who came to visit in the quiet of the morning. He warmly welcomes the boy, hands over the potions he prepared himself, and invites him inside to seal the deal. Entering the shop, he warmly greeted Alicia. Alicia sincerely thanks for the lightning-fast delivery, enthusiastically noting both the quality and quantity of materials he managed to gather. He confidently says that the supplies will last for the next week, and they agree to maintain this delivery schedule. She returns to prepare the payment and open the shop, while he and the boy wait patiently. He gestured towards the freshly prepared monster meat, and proudly explained that his storage skill allowed him to keep it perfectly fresh for their meal. The boy takes a hesitant bite, and his eyes suddenly widen with genuine joy at the unexpected taste. He then invites Alicia to join in tasting the dish while the payment is finalized. She tries the dish, her eyes open wide in sincere amazement at the flavor. The boy excitedly asks if it is fish, but freezes when he hears it is stone bison meat. The boy admits that at first he took the dish for snake meat and marvels at how tasty it is. He explains that he used leftover ingredients from the potion to prepare the dish. It turned out much tastier than he initially imagined, so he offers it to his companions. Switching the conversation to a business tone, the boy asks if there are small bottles for his potion. He gladly offers a discount on supplies because he has already received so much help, and asks the woman if she agrees to a trade. They made a successful deal, a wonderful start for the trio in a foreign land, and their friendship only grows stronger. The traveler stands before his home, a dwelling perfectly suited for a quiet life. He has chosen to live near the edge of the endless forest. He goes deeper into the forest, noticing that even locals and other adventurers rarely venture so far into this unknown. Although there are no mighty monsters in this area, it abounds with valuable plants, true gold for gatherers, and surprisingly profitable. Suddenly, a majestic white creature appears before him, a unicorn, elegant in appearance but actually fierce and aggressive. He draws his blade and tenses as the creature charges its long, sharp horn, ready to pierce anyone who dares stand in its way. After a lightning-fast clash, the creature is subdued, its horn cut off, and he realizes that without the horn the beast is no more than a simple white horse. He carefully examines the trophy and after assessing it, confirms. The unicorn's horn has an S rarity, a truly powerful ingredient for strong healing potions and enchanted gear. Satisfied with his luck, he decides to rest for a moment and admire the peaceful beauty of the forest. He finds himself beside his companions Alicia and a young boy, and all together deeply immersed in a delicate task, creating and improving equipment. Taking a moment to catch his breath, he pours himself a drink and savors this brief pause from their joint work. Suddenly he shudders. A creature appears nearby, having sneaked up unnoticed, and with a sigh he realizes his vigilance still fails him. Observing the beast, he decides to offer it a piece of his food. He is curious how it will react. The creature accepts the offering and chews contentedly, and he grimaces in a smile, acknowledging its hunger. When the food runs out, the beast nudges him, asking for more, but he gently explains that there is nothing left. Noticing a wound on the creature, he anxiously bent down and extended a potion to help it heal. The beast suddenly shuddered in a trembling jerk, and he froze for a moment at this strange behavior. He watched in surprise as the creature suddenly shuddered violently, and its form reacted strangely to the potion he offered. Wondering if he had encountered a forest guardian, he stepped back and silently watched as the beast settled down. The creature left behind a horn, and he instantly realized it was high-quality raw material for potions, so this unexpected turn of events greatly pleased him. Finally, with new material in his pocket, he rushed to brew more potions to deliver them to Kerchi's shot. He spent the next hours working hard in the field. The rhythmic swings of his tool cleared the ground. Wiping sweat from his forehead, he paused for a moment and reflected on how his life had become, feeling a quiet pride from hard manual labor. Returning home, he immersed himself in repairs and realized that even the simple household chores of a slow life brought him true satisfaction. He ended the day by smoking meat from the remains of a large boar to have provisions for the future. He carefully prepares the meat, rubbing into its fibers a mixture of salt, sugar, and finely chopped herbs to squeeze out the last drops of blood. After finishing the curing, he relies on his preservation skill to accelerate the aging, and at the same time gathers firewood for smoking. When the time has passed, he carefully washes the salt off the meat by immersing it in a barrel of fresh water to remove its saltiness. After drying the surface, he hangs the meat to smoke for 5 hours, and with a smile notes that his preservation skill keeps the meat in perfect condition without any extra effort. While the meat smokes, he switches to dinner, gathering wine, garlic, tomatoes, and mushrooms to prepare a thick, rich sauce. He quickly boils the meat, seasons it, then slowly fries onions in butter with garlic until it takes on a deep caramel golden hue. The appetizing smell of garlic fills the air, a sign that the base of his dish is perfectly composed. He finishes the dish by adding tomatoes to the pot and mashing them under a gentle simmer until a thick, aromatic sauce forms. He continues cooking. When the tomatoes soften, he pours a little red wine into the pot, allowing the flavors to meld. Focused and careful, he adds dried meat and mushrooms to the gently bubbling stew and adjusts the heat so the dish cooks slowly and evenly. While working, he thinks about his unique preservation ability, how it allows him to perfectly cure ingredients, and suddenly an unexpected guest appears before him, a large horned beast. The essence vibrates with a powerful magical aura, and he involuntarily wonders if a high-level monster is before him, so he automatically activates the storage skill and prepares a bunch of different spices. He cautiously approaches the beast, extends a piece of his lunch to it, and is amazed when the creature seems to accept this offer to share food. Finally, the stew is ready, and he serves a bowl to his unusual guest, explaining that sharing food is a sign of gratitude for the life that feeds them. The beast devours the food with appetite, which makes him offer another portion, encouraging his new companion to eat without any hesitation. He bites off a piece himself and savors the rich, complex shades of the dish he prepared with such patience. He enjoys the tender, slowly braised beef tongue, feeling how the sweetness of the tomatoes perfectly plays with the rich demi-glace sauce. The dish is a true pleasure, and he cannot hold back a smile, enjoying the flavors as it turned out surprisingly pleasant. Under the wide moonlit sky, it seems to him that sitting at the same table with a magical beast is actually not so scary. The pot is empty, like a quiet hint that the main dish has already been eaten. He extends a glass of wine to his interlocutor and promises to bring snacks to complement the drink. With confident, skillful movements, he begins slicing fresh wild boar ham, impressed by how well everything turned out on the first try. He offers the tray, clinks his glass against the beast's bowl in a toast, and eagerly awaits the creature's reaction to the dried meat. The beast greedily devours the ham, while he sips wine, and in the simple pleasure of a good meal they find a common language. He looks with a gentle smile as the enchanting creature eagerly grabs the crumb he throws. Their quiet dinner continues in the soft evening glow. The creature emits a contented purr, as if echoing his own satisfaction while they share a glass of wine. Under the endless moonlit sky, he raises his glass in a silent toast, sealing the bond born over the shared meal. The next morning he immerses himself in kitchen work, skillfully frying eggs and preparing food with practiced movements. As he carries a fresh cup of tea, a sudden knock at the door interrupts his morning routine and makes him wonder who could visit so early. Opening the door, he froze in surprise. A woman stood in the doorway, and her presence filled the threshold with an unexpected sense of familiarity. He raised an eyebrow and asked why she suddenly appeared, and she waved it off with a smile, saying she just came to eat, though he insists this is not a restaurant. She shows that she brought something he might want, and his curiosity immediately ignites as she pulls out a mysterious item. He froze, staring at what was offered to him, not believing his eyes. Could this really be what he has been searching for so long? She extends a bag of rice, and he immediately demands to know where she got such a rarity for his breakfast. She smiled, dispelling his embarrassment, and insisted, "Since the food is already ready, just enjoy it, don't hesitate any longer." Although he takes the food, he is constantly fixated on the mystery of its origin. He understands. Finding out where the rice came from is more important than the dish itself. Inside the house, the young man inquired where the rice was from, and his companion replied that it was obtained in the dungeon. She explains that in the treasure chest, there was a sack of grain it was recognized as edible, and these were the very white grains he was looking for. He does not believe it, a dungeon full of food. She notes that the supplies found there are surprisingly practical. The conversation shifts to the unique environment of the dungeon. Spices grow here, and in the lower sea levels salt is abundant. Because of the marine nature of those depths, they suddenly realized they could not advance further without a ship that could navigate these waters. She details all the hardships of transporting the vessel. While he does not for a moment abandon the thought of the absurdity, how can food be placed above the dangers of the dungeon? Returning to the meal, he asked where that strange dungeon was located, and she noticed his unusual obsession with food. She offers to give him a ride to the town of Orda Botanico and adds that it is very close. She suggests using teleportation magic they would effortlessly find themselves in the dungeon, but he hesitates. He wants first to settle in their current life and build a strong foundation. He continues the conversation. With a sparkle of curiosity, he says he would like to dive into the dungeon in search of resources and asks if she would sell him some of her rice. She sighs and regrets that he disappeared without a word despite being comrades in the party. He left her wounded and abandoned. He is noticeably embarrassed. He has no idea where she is heading and why she suddenly changed so much. He demands explanations, asks how she managed to track him down, and emphasizes that he specially enchanted his magic bag so that no one else could get to it. She confessed she cast a tracking spell on the bag itself so no matter where he hid it or what tricks he used, she would always find it. He snapped irritably, accusing her of being too familiar and intrusive, and she calmly said he simply would not be able to eat that food without her help. She offers to give him rice and help with cooking, and he, realizing how important it is, accepts her with a radiant smile, eagerly awaiting a hearty meal at last. He sighed and resigned himself to the fact that he would have to get fish from the mountains, because his friend insisted on such an arrangement. She smiled and said that since she can teleport there and back, he could let her live with him. She even offered to help furnish the apartment. The next day he came home and froze. The house was completely different and he simply could not believe it. She asked in surprise where all these new pieces of furniture came from, and she just replied that she simply redecorated the room. She casually said that these things are war trophies taken from a bandit fortress. Earlier she had cleared. Seeing the state of his home, she allowed herself to cast a cleansing and preservation spell, and he felt both gratitude and slight shame at the same time. He shifted his attention to the food and asked how she was going to cook the rice he brought, and she meanwhile began to explain exactly how she prepares it. They sat next to each other, and he began asking about her past, not believing where she had such rare knowledge. She smiled and replied that she owed it to a traveling merchant she once knew. He smiled, joking that he did not remember his previous life, and wondered. The convenient polished modern rice was so sharply different from his current reality. Following the advice, he started washing the rice, preparing to spend an hour cooking a real dish. While working, he reviewed the menu and noticed there was soy sauce and the meat of the great boar was first class, simply made for katsudon. He gathered the necessary ingredients, onion and seaweed, like laminaria, and carefully prepared the base of the dish. With skillful movements, he grabbed the pork tenderloin and coated it in flour and egg, preparing it for hot oil. The impact of the meat on the frying pan filled the room. The sharp sizzling promised real deliciousness. He carefully turned up the heat. The rice began to simmer perfectly, while the pork continued frying. When the appetizing smell of fried meat and steam of rice filled the kitchen, he was overwhelmed with satisfaction from what he had cooked. He carefully lifted the appetizing golden brown cutlet from the oil, letting it drain to the last drop, and only then moved on to the final touches of his dish. The chef paused. The temptation to try the seasoning pulled him, but he restrained himself and waited, giving full attention to the slow stewing of the onion in the rich dashi broth with soy sauce and sugar. The base was ready. He placed the cutlet, poured beaten egg on top, covered the frying pan so the flavors would meld, and quietly thought that he would have to make proper bowls for future dishes. Steaming over the table, he called the others, served the steaming katsudon, and said that this dish made from the found ingredients was his everyday meal in the past. They gathered, took the first bites, and the unusual combination of textures and flavors caused them clear surprise and delight. She enjoys every breath of flavor and says that it is completely different, neither purely salty nor purely sweet, but impossible to tear away from. Watching them enjoy the food, he finally allows himself to taste. A satisfied smile blooms on his face, because the familiar taste confirms his success. An elevated mood reigns at the table. The contrast between the juicy cutlet and the tender sweetness of the rice turns out to be the perfect delight for everyone. He savored every bite, feeling how the rice perfectly complements the dish, while his companions looked admiringly at that unfamiliar, rich spiciness of the seasoning he called soy sauce. When explaining its origin, he said he found it by accident and suspected it came from a distant eastern land, but honestly admitted that he knew very little about its true source. The conversation shifted to culinary prospects. He thought that with a constant supply of rice, soy sauce, and miso, he could significantly expand his menu. They discussed the rarity of these goods. Such things were usually brought to the town of Aburo by merchants on foreign ships. Thinking about how to organize everything, he realized reaching Aburo is a long journey, but the prospect of obtaining those vital ingredients made the whole trip worth the effort. Confidently smiling, he accepted the challenge and assured them, if they get the ingredients, I'll handle the cookies. The group burst into laughter and cheers, praising his culinary skill and eagerly awaiting the feasts he promised to prepare. He was glowing with excitement and promised to cook something truly delicious as soon as they received the supplies, while his companions looked at him with hungry anticipation. Great Nils hovered over the carcass of the green drake, his hands busy dismantling it, and he mused aloud. Although the creature is small, the work is not quick at all. It will take at least half a day. He sees this beast as a forced exchange payment for a roof over his head and a piece of bread. The hall impresses. There is both a black buffalo and a stone bird, so the green drake seems only a pleasant trifle. Alicia approaches, asking where he has gone, and he gestures toward the preserved remains of that guess. She explains that although the city is a bit farther, when she was hunting black buffalo near the eastern mountains, she accidentally came across a drake as well. A loud protest. Such a distance is by no means a walk, but she only smiled and waved it off. Her teleportation magic makes this journey a trifle. Carelessly shrugging, she leaves the butchery to him, and he cannot help but notice how incredibly free-spirited she is. He returns to work thinking, Although it requires more effort, the meat is so high quality that all the effort is worth it. He exhales contentedly, wiping sweat from his forehead. The work is going well. The beast's remains are laid out. Every part has value. Blood and entrails will go into powerful potions, claws and scales for weapons or armor, and the magical stone is planned to be eaten. With such a catch, he realizes he can craft a bunch of useful things. The next day, he decisively sets about mapping the area and quickly notices. If you record places with resources and monster lairs, exploration goes much better, and it is easier to avoid dangerous areas. The forest is so vast that he thought the local guild of adventurers probably doesn't have maps of this area. So he moves on to explore the surroundings, with a small creature jumping nearby. He approaches a quiet lake and notices. This is the perfect place to make a map. Powerful monsters usually avoid this area. Although the mapping process delayed his journey, he realized the 1.5 hours spent traveling to this place make it ideal for a leisurely walk. He decided to take a risk and go deeper into the forest, carefully marking his path so that if he got lost, he could find his way back. With a slight smile and optimism, he thought that if he went further, he could find rare medicinal herbs or valuable materials from monsters. He had no idea that his fleeting curiosity was leading him straight into a trap. Suddenly, the calm was shattered by a piercing, unnatural scream that burst from the surrounding trees. Reacting instantly, he drew his blade and parried a sudden fierce strike from an attacker in camouflage, hiding in plain sight. He moved with refined skill, the sword dancing in the air, deflecting relentless whip-like branches that lashed at him. The attacker turned out to be a wooden giant, a monstrous creature perfectly camouflaged, as the very forest that sheltered him. With grim clarity, he understood. These creatures are true masters of disguise, waiting until a stranger wanders deep into their territory before attacking. He was stuck in the very heart of the wild forest. Around him was exactly what he so longed to explore. He realized too late that he had fallen into a trap. Dense thickets of medicinal herbs had lured him into the very heart of the forest. One trant by itself posed almost no threat, but their crowds were overwhelming. The situation became extremely dangerous. The danger intensified. He saw that among the wooden creatures closing in around him, there were other monsters hiding. He decided survival above all, to retreat, not to rush at the entire swarm. Suddenly speeding up, he dashed away from the ambush, breaking through thick thickets. Having retreated from the monsters to a safe distance, he froze, realizing he was lost in the thickets. Seeing a river nearby, he moved along its flow, full of hope that it would lead him out of this endless forest. Glancing into the distance, he noticed a massive, unnatural cluster of trees that seemed denser the further it stretched. He gazes into the dense, unnatural forest and feels as if the trees themselves repel him, guarding a world untouched by humans. Moving forward, he makes his way through thick undergrowth, leather armor creaking with every resolute step across the wild terrain. He comes across a strange horned creature, asks in surprise how it survives so deep in the forest, and offers it food in exchange for showing him the way. When he returns home, Alicia greets him. She warmly welcomes him, and Imagine's Abel standing nearby. She says she has strengthened the protective barriers. Now only they can pass through the gates, and no uninvited guest will break through. He says with surprise that the creature he brought is usually timid, but now it has become so bold that it approached right up to their house. Alicia laughs, sharing food with a monster. What a lonely life that is, to which he only gruffly responded defensively. She turns to prepare dinner, asks him to wait a minute, and he calmly agrees. He looks at the horned creature with curiosity. Its presence is like a strange stroke in the quiet domestic routine of their home. To avoid wasting supplies, he decided to use them to the fullest to cook a dish from the meat of the green drake, gathering onions, bacon, and cabbage for garnish. The real preparation begins. He carefully removes the cabbage leaves and fries finely chopped onions in butter until they become translucent. He thoroughly mixes the minced drake meat with the fried onions, adds breadcrumbs, eggs, salt, pepper, and a pinch of nutmeg to get a rich seasoned mixture. With skillful hands, he forms portions from it, tightly wraps each in cabbage leaves and secures them with strips of bacon. He carefully watches the quietly simmering pot, adding the final seasonings so the flavors are perfectly balanced. Seeing its size, he suggests to Alicia to have dinner outside. The house is too cramped for guests. Finally, the food is served, and they sit together under the open sky to share the fruits of his labor. He brings the steaming dish several stuffed cabbage rolls filled with green dragon meat, hoping that this unusual taste will please his companions. They hold hands in a moment of gratitude, ready to start eating what is before them. When he lifts the portion, abundant juices and a delicious aroma burst out. It means his culinary efforts have succeeded. Nodding with satisfaction, he encourages everyone, "Let's start eating immediately." He takes a bite, closes his eyes, and the rich meaty flavor floods his senses. Thinking about the texture, he realized that ground drake meat transforms toughness into a tender, explosive delight, and he can't wait to experiment more with this ingredient. She looks at the dish with delight, and noticing this, he offers another portion, and she smiles, saying that the cabbage perfectly captures the appetizing juice inside. They can't stop and continue feasting. The sweetness of the vegetables blends with the rich flavor of the meat, and she asks for another portion. She glanced at the plate, with a mixture of surprise and anxiety, noticing the huge amount of food and remarking how generous the portions are. He slightly shrugged, as if saying there is still plenty left, so just enjoy. Next to them, a creature eagerly nudged its bowl, clearly full but still asking for more. When the conversation turned to their future plans, she said that as soon as she settles current matters, she will head to the eastern lands, as he advised. His eyes widened with genuine surprise, and she began explaining how everything is arranged. Although she could teleport to familiar towns, to the far east she would still have to travel by cart and spend quite a lot of time. She told how vast this land is. It takes almost a month to travel by carriage to the eastern border, but she hoped to find new teleportation points along the way. He nodded in agreement and made it clear that he would definitely repay her honestly for the help. They discussed the essence of their agreement, and he admitted the craft was just a hobby for him, but he hoped to obtain rare materials in high-level dungeons, exchange them for food and shelter, and thus get closer to the goal. Finding ingredients for Easter. He watches as the creature greedily licks its food. The creature's insatiable appetite makes him throw a dry remark whether it has eaten enough, and with this, he signals that the feeding is finally over. Even in the new world, the young man feels some rituals do not let go. First and foremost, the bitter morning cup that ties him to memories of his past life. He carefully measures the dark coffee grounds, a habit from his previous life, where this ritual was mandatory before starting the workday. When the water pours, he notices how this simple action sharpens his senses and clears the fog of sleep from his head. He recalls his childhood surprise, why adults drink such a bitter thing, and suddenly realizes that, having grown up, he himself has adopted the same habit. The aroma rises, and he smiles. This habit has already become ingrained in his daily rhythm, wherever he goes. He remembers how his tastes have changed. Once sugar and milk were needed to hide the bitterness, but now he appreciates the drink in its purest and strongest form, to the surprise of everyone around. Alicia looked curiously into the dark liquid, prompting him to explain that it was a special tea brewed from the roots of the popo flower. He explains that the tea, besides its taste, gently awakens him and helps restore his body's strength, adding that the popo flower is common, its yellow petals fall off and turn into soft fluff. He continued enthusiastically explaining about the popo flower, saying that although it is ordinary, its magical properties make it an excellent ingredient for potions. She listens attentively, but the bitter tea he brewed makes her grimace from the very first sip. He suggests adding milk and sugar to mask the bitterness, explaining, the flower is powerful but not known for its pleasant taste. The young man tells more about his discovery. Mixing the flower with certain minerals produces a restorative elixir, but he warns about side effects. He says the potion gives a short burst of strength but warns, if consumed too much it can become poison. She did not hide her surprise at this discovery, and noted that Abel was the first to suggest such a practical use of the common weak. He looked at her reaction and understood. The potion rather enhances her abilities than turns her into a fool. The conversation quieted when they both realized how many useful resources had been right in front of them all this time. He becomes the subject of a joking remark. His friend smiles and says that without him life would be bland because he is the one who adds flavor to it. Having finished the daily alchemical tasks, he heads to the kitchen softening butter, carefully adding sugar and beating until the mixture lightens, adding yolks and gently folding in sifted flour, kneading the dough to perfect consistency, rolling it out and cutting even pieces ready for the oven. He places the baking tray in the oven, which is heated by an enchanted brick, using its ability to retain heat so the baking cooks evenly. He patiently waits while the heat transforms the dough into a wonder. The cookies are finally ready, and although they look a bit simple, he recalls the final touch that can make them truly special. He remembered how, while gathering roots, he came across wild berries and decided to save them for later. With a calm hand, he gently stirs in the cauldron, for he has gathered so many fruits that soon they will cook into a thick, aromatic jam. Here they are finally, buttery cookies generously covered with freshly made berry jam. He admires the finished treats, and with delight notices that the jam has significantly improved their appearance. Taking a bite, he feels how the sweet cookie and the tart jam harmonize wonderfully, an incredible combination. Turning away from his culinary triumph, he thoughtfully begins preparing a lunchbox, another task completed for today. He heads outside and walks toward the lake, where he gathers medicinal herbs and occasionally fends off monsters. He thoughtfully considers that near home it is quite safe, and to encounter a real threat, one must go deeper into the forest. He stopped, felt the strange silence of the hunting grounds, and wondered, has this calm environment lulled him into complacency? With a quick movement, he activated his storage ability, drew his blade, and prepared to delve deeper into the dark depths of the cave. Raising the lantern upward, he illuminated the shadows, puzzled by the absence of insect-like monsters he expected to find in this nest. He noticed that there was almost no magic around and thought, this place is hardly to be called a dangerous dungeon. A calm settled on his face. He felt that no immediate threat was hiding in the darkness. Having decided to explore further, he adjusted his gear and moved forward into the glow. Suddenly, a hearty sandwich appeared before him, pulled from his stash, abruptly interrupting his exploration. Finally, hunger caught up with him, and with a satisfied smile, he prepared to savor the meal in the quiet cave. He looked into its eyes, feeling no hostility, and said loudly, assuring the invisible observers that he had no intention to fight for territory and would leave as soon as he ate. From the shadows emerges a creature, its appearance announced by a clear rhythmic tapping. He raises his sandwich and offers a deal. He will give meat, vegetables, and fruits grown on the surface in exchange for their rare ores. The creature, a mole-like beast known as a wormhole, tilts its head with curiosity, as if asking whether he also has something sweet to offer. He smiles, shows that he indeed has cookies he baked himself, and says with a smile that these creatures are famous for nimble fingers and the ability to make magical tools from underground ore. The molehill accepts the offering. Its tiny hands impatiently grab the wood. A genuine delight blossomed on the creature's face as it tasted the sweetness. This gesture breaks the tension. The creature and its kin gather around him, gladly accepting the food, and thus an unexpected alliance begins. He makes a proposal to exchange surface goods for rare underground minerals and plants, and directly asks the creature if it can fulfill his specific requests. The creature eagerly accepts the offer and noisily asks for more cookies as a reward for its help. He carefully examines the received item. The quality impresses, and its unique properties seem to appear before his eyes. He hesitates, pointing out that the cookie is too expensive, but the creature does not back down and insists even more persistently. The creature extends a pouch of black pepper and warns him that it is so powerful that careless opening will make him sneeze. He says that pepper is expensive, but he has a supply left from previous travels, so he is willing to exchange it. He says directly he needs exactly those minerals and gems that can hold magical enchantments, and this news ignites true excitement among the creatures. They reached a mutual agreement, promising to prepare various materials for the next meeting, while he quietly pondered his unexpected discovery. He introduced himself to the creature, explaining that he is a man who lives on the edge of the forest, and the creature in response called itself a talpa. When they understood each other, he extended his hand to seal their new partnership. The small creatures gather around him. Their appearance means that the trade has successfully begun. Realizing the time, he decided to return. The forest seemed treacherously deep, and every step exhausted his body. As he was leaving, suddenly a silent horned creature appeared before him, and he asked himself if it was really a coincidence. He explains to the creature that he has no intention of invading the depths of the forest where the moles live, and prefers that their conversations remain private and limited. The beast watches him as if going over his words in its mind, hinting that it might one day share this with Abel. He watches as the creature retreats, thinking about the secrets of the forest and the danger that will arise if someone finds the mole's dwelling and starts extracting minerals from there. He looks intently at the horned creature, and the mystery presses on his mind. He only wants to obtain the necessary resources through peaceful trade, because he fears that any exposure of the mole's refuge will provoke conflict with other races. Turning his attention to the present, he shrugged off all those noble rights and political disputes, simply thanked for the quiet life he desires, shrugged his shoulders, and invited his companion to return home for lunch, aloud asking if the creature would join him. The young adventurer comes to the shop and asks distrustfully whether his partner really intends to go with him on this delivery, since with the teleportation mage the journey would be a trifle, but he still heads to the storefront. He greets the shopkeepers with a smile and shows the goods he brought on this visit. The women warmly welcome him and sincerely thank him for constantly buying from them. They smiled and introduced themselves as sisters Alicia and Kirchai, explaining that they know Abel, the traveler who often uses their services. She smiles, says quietly, "I am Abel, a mage," and kindly welcomes him to the shop. He begins to display his goods, enthusiastically talking about the properties of the usual healing and refreshing potions, while also highlighting a new ointment created to fight muscle fatigue and provide a boost of vigor. The sisters, shining with gratitude, praised his goods, saying they are first class, and the potions are famous for their effectiveness. He hands them a sample of the new skin ointment, smilingly explaining how it helps with dry or cracked skin, and they gratefully accept. He presents the sisters with a small jar of his latest alchemical creation, and explains that it is a fragrant ointment made from crow flowers. She carefully examines the jar, smells the pleasant aroma, and asks if it is for skin care, to which he nods in confirmation. The sisters sincerely thanked him, and eagerly wanted to try immediately how the ointments tighten and relax. Meanwhile, the mage Abel intervened, jokingly demanded a share of the ointment for himself, which greatly surprised the others, who could not understand why he was interested in skin care. He shrugged, brushed off the jokes, and said that trying new things is quite natural. And meanwhile, the conversation shifted to the fact that the ordered supplies for the household would arrive any moment. A young boy comes in, enthusiastically praising the ointment he received, and says that it significantly eased lifting heavy objects. He heads deeper into the shop to get money for the potion, leaving the others to continue the conversation. When the deal was completed, the sisters curiously observed his unusual calculating device and wondered what methods he used to conduct his trade. Still attentively listens, her curiosity ignited by the ingenuity of this device. She jokingly asks if he would make one for her as well, though she doubts whether a mage really needs such a trading tool. The sorceress admits, every new useful thing kindles a passion in her, and the ability to count would be invaluable in her official work. The next day he comes to the market, Kerch warmly welcomes him, and the noisy 5-day fair begins. He sets up his stall and displays a collection of small items and decorations imbued with various charms. In the table they examined the goods and were amazed. These were not just trinkets but real complex magical instruments. She points to a hair ornament that changes color and to a water vessel with thermal insulation, asking if he now makes equipment for secret operations. She carefully studies the brooch in his hand and asks what such a design was meant to imply, and he with a slight smile says that it might appeal to women who appreciate fashion, adding that its size is versatile enough to fit even an undercover man. He looked at her in surprise when she suggested that he make one for her, and quickly assured that he had no such intention at all. She firmly advises not to sell his products to nobles, they only bring headaches, so she insists on introducing him to a respectable merchant guild so that his inventions reach the right hands without hassle. He listens as she insists whether he properly registered his new creations with the guild she suspects. He prefers to avoid bureaucratic troubles. She suggests going together to the royal capital, where she will help him settle into the guild and introduce him to local traders. He agrees with the plan, acknowledging the necessity of proper registration, and she smiles contentedly. The arrangements are settled. In a moment, a client distracted him. He had not noticed new visitors entering until someone nudged him to look up. He pays attention to the new visitors, explains how the hair ornament that changes color works, and offers to adjust it to a different shade if they wish. He gestures, inviting the client to try on the magical hair ornament, and watches with delight as she eagerly fastens it. She looks at the transformation with admiration. Her hair now shines with gold, and she gladly agrees to give 2 large silver coins. He explains how to care for the item. The magical stone will fade when its power runs out, but it can be recharged to continue using it. The deal is completed. He offers her a sample of cream that smooths the skin, as he plans to later display it in the Guild of Merchants. As soon as another buyer approaches and asks for a different color, he quickly prepares a second accessory of the same quality at the same price. The shop buzzes with life. The constant flow of visitors gives him no rest. He is always busy with his inventions. Outside, the noisy bazaar rages in its usual rhythm, and no one even suspects the little wonders being sold at the stall. Abel noticed his incredible concentration and suggested taking a break, handing him a sandwich to satisfy his hunger. He pauses his work for a moment and looks up when asked about the intricate spells on his silver products, explaining that he simply casts magic directly on them, though he admits the process is becoming increasingly sophisticated. He enthusiastically explains the technique. By turning mistletoe into a liquid and mixing it with magic-infused silver, he can create much more complex enchantments than ordinary methods allow. The client seems embarrassed by the mention of mistletoe, so he patiently explains what materials he uses. The longer the conversation goes on, the more he catches himself thinking that he finds it difficult to get along with women. Next to the refinement of his client, he feels his own awkwardness in communication. She sincerely apologizes for not thinking earlier, and he warmly smiles and offers her to try on one of his magical brooches. As soon as she saw the brooch, she was filled with admiration. Her eyes opened wide and she insisted on buying it right there. He accepts the payment, modestly apologizes for his earlier social awkwardness, and brushes it off with a satisfied smile. Before her departure, he gives her a prototype and invites her to touch it to feel its unique properties. He carefully and patiently shows the client how to properly apply the magical ointment, making sure she knows how to remove and reapply it for the best effect. After completing the deal, he invites her to return on the next market day, and she teasingly mocks him for his obvious love of milk. When the buyer left, he warmly greeted the newcomers Kerch and a young boy who came to see how his business was going. He explains his approach. He likes to create the magical spell right on the spot, tailoring it to the specific needs of each client. The boy is delighted by the enchanting process itself, but honestly admits that he has no idea what effects to expect from this magic. He gently corrected the boy and said that for beginners, the most practical and sensible thing is to start with protective charms. He enthusiastically talks about the benefits of these talismans, explaining how they can protect against common dangers, for example, accidental poisoning or mild foodborne illnesses. He summarizes, these are cheap, disposable items made from simple materials designed for only a few uses, after which they lose their power. He listens attentively while the boy enthusiastically praises his work, noting that the true value lies in the skill of the creator. The youth insists on details, directly asking what specific threat his protective charms can ward off and whether they can handle the poison of a glass viper. Confidently smiling, he corrects the boy's assumption and insists, his creations are worth much more than a simple silver coin. He encourages the boy to see the value of craftsmanship, and the listeners clearly support this. Kurchai interrupts and says that his prices are becoming increasingly capricious, so he asks to consult with her more often to keep the business affairs in order. Politely declined so as not to burden her further, but gladly agreed to display his goods in her shop at the next fair. She smiled and encouraged him, saying that his efforts would surely bring better profit. The boy confesses, although he strives to study, his true desire is to become a master, not a merchant, and these words momentarily plunge him into reflection. Abe comes to check how the market is going and explains that he mostly manned the stall himself, promising to review the day's results in more detail later. He shares a light, cheerful moment with the boys who stand by the counters and laugh, driving away the fatigue of the day. Suddenly his face became anxious, felt a disturbance in the air, and aloud asked if a mighty magical beast had appeared nearby. He felt urgency when a messenger ran in breathless, and panicked and reported that a huge tourist had blocked the eastern road just outside the city. This stunned him and made him ask himself where such a sudden and dangerous turn of events came from. A monster named Rictortes looms, a giant over 10 meters tall, living in volcanic regions. Its skin is extremely tough, and what it eats makes it incredibly strong, so people who track such monsters study it closely. In the bustling hall of the Adventurers Guild, the air is tense. The group says this situation is impossible. They lack high-ranking adventurers capable of dealing with such a threat. The dispute is heating up. They say sending a downgraded team means a death sentence, and delaying the neutralization of the beast will only lead to the blocking of important trade routes and a shortage of supplies in the town. Alicia interrupted the conversation, filled with anxiety. Is it really worth going headlong? Even if we manage to defeat the beast, there could be many human casualties, so she insisted on a more cautious plan to act together. She turns her attention to the newcomer and asks if he is the one who just re-registered. She needs someone from the B rank to help with this investigation request. He says that although he has little experience with Rictortes, he has connections in the guild in the capital, even the A-rank mage Abel, who might have the advanced evaluation skills to discern what this monster is made of. The mention of an A-rank adventurer caused a real stir among the listeners. They were clearly stunned by the level of the person being proposed for this case. They concluded that a joint operation with the Bamin mercenaries might be the only real way out. But they still fear the huge power difference between individual Rictortes. A regular extermination mission would be deadly dangerous. He turned to his companion and said, "Since the road is blocked, let's consider this an urgent request," and directly asked if the mage from the capital has the necessary strength. The man in armor objected and asked how they plan to act, adding that if they gather enough people who can break through the monster's defense, it could be tamed. He shook his head and insisted, no matter how many people gather, their strike simply won't hit. The creature is immune to ordinary attacks. Revising the tactics, he suggested conducting a preliminary study to find out what this particular beast is made of, insisting on caution and putting personal safety above all else. The mission was announced as an A-rank taming request, a dangerous task for which a solid reward was promised. She inquired about the negotiations and added that although the details of the Adventurers Guild are still unknown, the soldiers initially planned a joint operation to repel the threat. They discussed the next mission tensely, especially worrying about what would happen if they had to engage in battle and defeat the monster during reconnaissance. He simply explained the financial logic. If the investigation turns into taming, the reward system will change, and materials obtained from the monster will become an additional incentive for adventurers. He listened as Alicia reminded him that their current goal was only reconnaissance, not an open clash, and directly asked if he was ready for the mission. The young man pondered. If that beast was made of ultra-pure materials like orichalcum or adamantite, ordinary magic might prove powerless, and he began to doubt whether he would be useful in the upcoming fight at all. She brushed off his worries and firmly said, "Tonight is only thorough preparation, and tactical details will be discussed later." He examined the creature's physical features, noticing variations in color and density, and Alicia confirmed. It was rank A and it needed to be properly assessed. She ordered him to be on alert, warning that the monster would most likely immediately launch a wide-radius attack which he would have to dodge in time. The plan was simple: to divert the creature's attention from him so he could deliver the decisive blow while the beast was distracted. He nodded resolutely and prepared to start the operation. He activated his physical enhancement, his eyes fixed on the beast's gaze, ready to strike with the precision needed to exploit its weakness. He lunged forward, his gaze locked on the huge serpentine beast emerging from the ground. This was the signal to begin the attack. Before the duel fully unfolded, he quickly drank a potion to become stronger, knowing it would blur his vision, a necessary price. Channeling magic through enchanted boots, He executed a precise maneuver and stopped the creature's destructive mass attack, neutralizing the shockwaves. He finally feels the full seriousness of the situation. The monster's gravity magic is much more powerful than they thought, and this is a real S-rank threat requiring his absolute concentration. When only 5 minutes remain from the potion, he pushes himself to the limit to finish the job and clear the way for his friend to strike. He silently stays in the shadows so the monster does not notice Abel, preparing to break through its defense. The echo of his strike swept across the battlefield, a powerful hit forced the creature to retreat, and he immediately took advantage of his edge. He freezes for a moment, feeling the heavy price of the potion's recoil, but remains determined because he knows the battle is not over yet. He swallows a potent elixir made from the blood of a green dragon, feeling the turbulent liquid surge into his veins and push his body beyond natural limits. A sudden surge of strength throws him to his knees, the ground cracking under the weight of his enhanced physical presence. He gasps convulsively for air, his body trembling. Burning heat bursts from the potion, threatening to consume all his senses. With a jerk, he struck the beast, flipping the giant creature onto its back and rendering it helpless for a moment. He struggles to maintain balance and realizes with horror. The potion's effect is rapidly fading, making him dangerously vulnerable. He turns to his companion and warns. The beast has already been hit twice by gravitational attacks over a wide area, so only a brief moment remains to act. He disregarded the difference between 1 or 2 strikes, saying it was just a technical detail, and insisted she focus all her attention on the first open opportunity. She responds to his signal and steps forward. Magic crackles in her hands. She prepares to deliver the final blow and leaves him to recover. She directs her magical energy. The air around trembles with tension as she prepares to strike the beast. The monster named Lictortes proved resistant to both physical and magical attacks. Its tough skin absorbed the main blow. Realizing that even the fiercest beast needs air, she skillfully alters the space around it, and the monster begins to suffocate. When the vacuum takes hold, she isolates the creature from its environment, leaving it helpless, gasping for air. When the threat finally receded, he fell to the ground and thought about how much reliable allies nearby mean. The young adventurer froze amid the ruins, puzzled. The huge beast he was studying suddenly vanished into thin air. He explains to his companion that the creature is defeated and now it's time to prepare food, adding that he has already hidden the carcass using his spatial match. She explains, although the beast is resistant to magic, it is not invulnerable, and to overcome it, one must rely on physical strength. The conversation suddenly changes when they are asked if they are familiar with the famous mage of the capital Abel. He dodges the question, but the mention of the Crimson Beast Tamer briefly ignites a spark of recognition in his eyes. The observer adds, rumors say that the adventurer is a master of beasts, often seen taming monsters that even the strongest guild members cannot handle. She enthusiastically adds that both he and his companion are well-known people. They even have their own fan club and the honorary title Dragon Slayer. Stunned by the discovery, the group just stood with open mouths and couldn't believe that they were real legends. He carefully reviews the guild journal and notices. The defeats of S-rank monsters are officially recorded on the back pages. The guard confirmed, the threat of Reincarnated is neutralized. I will deliver this news to the local lords. She happily approaches him and asks to shake hands to remember this moment. He sincerely thanks her for organizing the report, and she, rejoicing, is already planning to share this story with the fan club and send it to the guild bulletin. Standing shoulder to shoulder, they agree that a little risk is just part of the life of an adventurer. He sternly orders her to get meat and liver from the stash, promising to cook the food himself while she rests. Returning to the guild to submit the report and invite comrades to dinner, he thoughtfully wondered how they managed to sell off the extra materials and thus cover the expenses of their recent reckless adventure. He begins to tear apart the huge pile to get to his meat, ready to fulfill the promise of the feast. He carefully arranges the ingredients for the feast. For the rector, he lays out meat, liver, and fresh vegetables, and turning his thoughts to his past life, recalls how the properties of that creature reminded him of a soft-shelled turtle and prompted him to experiment with traditional soy sauce. Focused, he began cutting the meat, thinking that the liver of the Reincarnated is famous for its powerful healing power since it is edible. Why not take advantage of such a valuable gift? Carefully lowers the liver into the boiling broth and generously adds sake to extinguish any unwanted odors. From one animal, there are so many ingredients that he can afford to be generous with portions. While the pot slowly simmers, he diligently removes all excess from its surface and maintains an even heat so that the flavors perfectly blend before the final seasoning. He shifts his attention to the next task and begins preparing a fried dish. He divides the meat. One half he seasons with salt, the other with soy sauce, carefully rubbing the flavor deep into the cuts. The oil in the pan shimmers. He starts freeing the meat sizzles as it touches the heat, and he watches eagerly as the pieces turn golden brown. The kitchen fills with an irresistible aroma, and he smiles, knowing that the smell of fried food simply has no equal in stirring the appetite. He lifts a perfectly fried piece with chopsticks, its golden crust gleaming ready to taste the fruits of his labor. He lifts a piece of golden fried meat with chopsticks, a satisfied smile blooming on his face. He prepares to taste the fruits of his labor. He is delighted by the taste. This Rictordes S level surpasses everything he has cooked in the dungeon before, probably due to the better cooking methods he applied. Savoring the very hot fried meat, he thinks that some prefer it cold and makes a note to himself. Later, I will compare this with the taste of turtle meat. Casting his gaze on the next ingredient, he began carefully slicing the jelly-like embra, preparing it for the next stage of his culinary creation. He scalds the sliced embra with boiling water, confident that this collagen-rich dish will win over Alicia, then drains the water and sets the pieces aside. With skilled hands, he expertly combines the prepared roast with thinly sliced cucumbers in a bowl, seasoning everything with precise pinches of salt, sugar, and vinegar. He finishes the dish, noting that if left to rest in storage, the flavors will blend perfectly, and offers a portion to the little creature nearby. He carefully slices the meat to the perfect thickness, recalling techniques from his past life, then scalds the white parts and cools them in ice water. The final touch greens and the dish is ready. He shouted to Abel, "The food is ready, it can be served." When he opens the door, he is greeted by an impatient companion who is waiting for this very moment. The creature chirps with delight, and he assures him that a portion has been set aside especially for him. Abe looks admiringly at the variety of Rictordes, impressed by the amount of food, and suggests tasting the other dishes first. He takes out a bottle of wine and, smiling, says that he diluted it with fruit juice. It is safer and tastes better for their gatherers this way. Raising their glasses, they toast to the banquet, their faces shining with anticipation. He offers a piece of raw meat and confidently says that it pairs perfectly with the wine. She freezes, wondering if it is really safe to eat it raw. Ignoring her hesitation, he begins to eat, enjoying the dish, while the little creature watches intently, waiting for its portion. She insists that he first use his skill to evaluate the food, but he jokingly refuses, claiming that knowing the details in advance would only spoil the whole pleasure of the experience. After taking a bite, she is pleasantly surprised the texture was dense, and the flavor much cleaner than she expected, so it paired perfectly with the drink. He encourages her to eat as much as she wants, gesturing towards a pile of fried meat. She accepts it with a smile. She admits, although raw meat is tasty, she likes fried meat more. Its unique texture makes it the best thing she has ever tasted. He laughs and says that his choice between them often depends on the day, while they continue sharing the dish and wine. While the lunch continues, he insists that she try a little more of the raw dish, glowing with joy seeing how much she enjoys his food. He watched the pot being prepared closely, noticing vinegar being poured into the broth, and she explained that although it is not a usual soup, the meat and vegetables are eaten, and the remaining liquid can be used in other dishes. Swallowing, he felt the richness of the spices and wondered how such a simple preparation could produce such a luxurious taste. He notes with surprise the unexpected depth of the meat's flavor and shares this amazement with his companion as they continue enjoying the meal. Seeing the creature joyfully enjoying the food, he laughed. Clearly, she likes it, so he decided to join in with his portion. They share a quiet moment of pleasure, savoring the warmth and multifaceted flavors that fill the air. She describes the texture of the meat with such enthusiasm, praising its elasticity, that deep, rich flavors unfold on the tongue. Watching her passion, she gently remarked on her healthy appetite and smiled as it greedily devoured the treat. He smiles, full and satisfied, decides to try another portion, and happily continues their shared meal. He smiles, seeing how she glows with joy. He notices how the texture of the ingredients makes the dish truly delicious. She jokingly asks if he plans to finish all the soup, suggesting to leave half for later. He carefully sorted through the remaining ingredients, noticed that there were almost no mollusks left, agreed with her proposal, and decided to use the leftover broth to prepare a rice dish. He begins to cook, carefully pours the beaten eggs into the quietly bubbling pot and watches to keep the fire moderate. As soon as the mixture begins to take shape, the hand reaches out to pause the process, and his companion casts a curious glance at him. He notices the pause, the pot quietly bubbles, and they wait for the perfect moment to continue. With a nod, he signals no need to wait any longer, lifts the lid and shows the steaming, aromatic contents. Now the dish is ready, a hearty, appetizing rice porridge soaked with the flavor of the previous meal. She catches the appetizing aroma, her face brightens, she prepares to serve the dish, and he reminds her to be careful with the hot. She tastes the first spoonful of rice porridge, feeling how the grains have perfectly softened in the broth. He looks at her and gently reminds her to blow on the hot food before eating, warning against using ice magic to cool it down. He bites off himself, agreeing that the food is incredibly tasty and hearty, and their companion, a small creature, greedily licks its portion. She continues eating with genuine pleasure, noting that the sweetness of the egg adds a wonderful touch to the spicy soup, and the tiny creature enthusiastically finishes its bowl, clearly enjoying the dish just as much as her companions. For a moment they are full of quiet satisfaction, and the creature stretches out an empty bowl as if asking for another portion. The pot is now empty, and she thoughtfully considers that this dish is perfect for the cold season, so she suggests hunting for even more such creatures when it gets cold again. He thoughtfully reflects on the creature's habits and aloud asks whether it hibernates in winter. He decisively decides to explore the dungeon where those creatures dwell, and confirms to her that they should first and foremost track them to have something to eat in the future. He pointed to the night sky and thoughtfully said that the desire for tasty food is a basic and entirely justified human instinct. When the meal ended, the mood sharply changed. Abel, dressed in elegant clothes with a stern expression, was instantly teleported by a magical teleportation to the royal capital, where under the cover of night she was dragged through the city streets. After the chaotic events of the previous night, the group found themselves in the royal capital, having already settled all necessary administrative matters in the guild. Finally, they returned to the warm comfort of their home to rest. On the tea channel, Abel spoke first, sincerely confessing that she passionately wants to learn more about the properties of Richter's blush. She continues to ask Gran to tell in detail about that battle with the beast, especially inquiring about the bow, potions, and explosives that were used. Sipping the drink, she insists that potions must be carefully checked before sale, and adds that through family connections she can find reliable people to help. Image asks further that Gran prepare a batch of potions, including the very elixir he previously gave the girl at the counter for her nails. She gently assures him, as his close friend, she will support him as a producer, ensure that his creations are truly valued, and that he receives fair compensation. Grant agrees with her proposal, and as she is about to leave, he quietly sighs, hoping that there will be no unnecessary complications ahead. He froze, feeling an unexpected presence near the gates, and aloud asked if someone had come to visit him. Brushing off the thought, he grumbled that only Abel and a beast could bypass his defense, and was surprised that he was compared to such creatures. It struck him like thunder in the head. His protective barrier, maintained by Abel's magic, was bypassed by a creature that seemed to treat this boundary as if it did not exist. Stepping outside, he faced 3 young women at his gates, and saw that they seemed to be struggling with the same barrier created to keep uninvited guests out. He approached them, calmly asked if they needed help, his hand resting on the gate while he carefully observed their embarrassment. Frightened by his sudden appearance, the visitors recoiled, and one plaintively said that they had been warned not to come here to avoid incurring the wrath of the one guarding this place. Noticing their uncertainty, he said he was too busy for idle talk, pushed the gates and closed them, thus putting an end to this meeting. When the gates closed, the girls stretched out their hands in desperate pleading, asking him to wait. He stopped his work, looked through the gates with a puzzled expression, and asked what the guests could want from him. The 3 young women exchanged glances. They felt the trace of magic emanating from the house, left by a man named Lotto. They described the one they were looking for. A tall, fair-haired man, and suddenly froze when he unexpectedly appeared before them, and sharply asked why they were interfering in his affairs. He categorically rejected their words, saying that no one by that name lived there and that he had never even seen such a person. The guests did not fully believe. They whispered among themselves that it was hard to imagine Lotto living among people, and guessed that perhaps they had just accidentally come across his trail. He watches them from the gate, making sure they found no one, and ironically asks if this will finally be enough for them to leave. The longer they wander, the stronger his suspicion grows, whether they are truly just lost or if they are actually malicious intruders wanting to steal from the human house. He firmly says it is time to go, and politely but definitively waving his hand, watches them leave, closing the gate behind them. He watches as the 3 guests happily crowd around the sweets he brought. Their excitement palpable, they discuss whether they can eat them before Lotto notices. Brushing it off, he tells them to decide for themselves whether to eat these treats or not, and asks them to be careful on their way home. They sincerely thank him, promising to return soon, and he remains watching them go with a feeling of unease that does not let go. Returning inside, he runs into Abel, who is already waiting, and he immediately asks who those 3 strangers are, teasing him as if he were entertaining young girls. He explains that they are clearly not human children, perhaps 4 spirits or half-humans living nearby. Abel thoughtfully turns his words over in his mind, as if afraid he might have left something behind without noticing, but he himself says he has no idea what it could be. He suggests, since they plan to return, this is the perfect chance for Abel to talk to them directly. The next day, he ordered her to go greet the guests, while he stayed to guard the house. She listens as the group rides in the carriage, notices the uneven road, and carefully checks if the boys are comfortable during this bumpy ride. In response to the question about the area, she explains that the forest to the north, known as the demonic forest, teems with many wild creatures and entities. She continues, explaining that there is no clear boundary, but the edge of the forest is like a buffer between human lands and untamed wilderness. The carriage rolls on and she notices, people once lived on the edge of the forest, but most have already moved to the town, so these places are almost abandoned. She adds that those who wander too deep into the forest often strangely find themselves back near the entrance, as if the forest itself repels them. Upon arriving home, she immediately hears. The guests are already here and their plans instantly change. Inside, the guests were genuinely happy, praising the cookies and food served to them and clearly enjoying the hospitality. She observes how the guests are introduced. They ask if they are family and are told that they are relatives. He watched as the eldest of the three visitors stepped forward and introduced herself as You, followed by her sisters Vero and Kuru, each insisting on being properly introduced as well. The young adventurer cleared his throat and introduced himself. I am Gran, a friend of Abel, and the guests leaned forward with keen, anxious curiosity. Alicia entered the room, gracefully introduced herself and her sister Kirche, saying they run a shop in the town of Payman, while a small creature fussed in the background. When the house suddenly became crowded, he suggested getting comfortable while he prepared drinks and snacks, adding that more tables and chairs were needed. He politely apologized and headed to the kitchen, leaving the guest in the living room so that he could settle in. While he was working, Abel approached and whispered about the mysterious trio, saying that she saw the sign of the goddess on them and he clearly shuddered at this. He pondered her words, wondering if they were the forest guardians. Their presence reminded him so much of the forest spirits he had already encountered. An epiphany struck him. He remembered the persistent magical trace the guardians left in the house, and this finally confirmed his suspicions about their true nature. He thoughtfully recalled recent events, how the guardians protecting the sisters had come into human territory, supposedly in search of the house. The young adventurer suddenly began to doubt his own past and dreamed of the question, what had happened before he ended up here? He realized that, except for today, all this time he had been here only in the company of Abel and the familiar creature Shimoas. Suddenly, a voice pulled him out of his thoughts and offered to give the answers about the sisters he was looking for. She sat opposite him, her face calm, and was now about to reveal the truth about why they ended up here. Her eyes caught his, and with a conscious gesture she began to shed her human form, revealing her true shape beneath. The creature removed the veil and revealed herself. She was a forest guardian, coming from sincere care for their well-being, and explained that they lived deep in the thickets, and their ability to blend with humans was a necessity to watch over the forest borders. He listened intently as the guardian explained. Her presence and the presence of the sisters were needed to guard the forest borders, a duty she fulfilled by allowing people to enter. She continued. She owed him a considerable debt, but doubted whether something specific had really happened that could explain this connection. The conversation turned to the past, when she recalled how he broke the unicorn's horn deep in the forest, an act that violated an ancient pact. She sighed and grew angry at the persistent, perverse creature that troubled the three sisters and caused them a lot of trouble. She pondered she could simply get rid of the annoying creature, but hesitated a little. She did not want to act solely out of her own disgust, even though the creature uninvitedly clung to young women. The keeper said that thanks to his intervention they would be able to live in peace for a while, but warned, if the creature's horn grows back again, he would have to break it once more. When the tension subsided, she nodded toward the dishes being prepared and gently invited him to join the sisters for a small lunch. He watched the burden of the ancient pact weigh on him, and strange new alliances slowly took root as the day went on. He stands by the table with a gentle smile, inviting others to the meal, but inside still smolders the suspicion that he is being lured into a domestic trap. Grant enters the room and exclaims that dinner is ready but freezes. Abel has sunk into a chair, exhausted after a long lecture. He calls the group, and they fly to him in excitement, their faces shining with anticipation of the feast. They look stunned at the variety of dishes and ask if this is really the cuisine of a big city. He simply nods in response. Alicia gazes at the dish and notices. The ingredients used here in the city are known for making people more beautiful. Guests were noisy and demanded sweets, primarily cake after yesterday's cookies, but he patiently asked them to sit and wait. He gently assures that the dessert is already waiting but insists, first finish the main course. Holding the bottle, he explains with a sparkle in his eyes that inside is a magical apple drink from the city. He pours the mixture, and the group with wide-open eyes holds their breath, watching the ingredients swirl together. They watch the potion being prepared. Honey flows in a thin stream into the glass, sweetening the base of Lictor's blood juice. She explains that it acts like a light potion, improving blood circulation and adding beauty. The guests feel a tingling. They are filled with wonder. They ask what kind of strange, sparkling dream this is. He gently calms them. If it is sufficiently diluted, there is nothing to worry about. She takes a sip, confirms that the drink is non-alcoholic. She has never seen such a novelty before. In this world, such carbonated drinks are a real rarity. You might only find them near volcanoes, and no one drinks them as ordinary refreshment. He reveals the secret. Mixing magical powder with lemon water and vinegar creates the signature fizz. They agreed to postpone technical details for now. First they will eat, and the origin of the magical powder they promise to discuss later. They are delighted with this treat, eagerly savoring the incredible fried chicken with mayonnaise, tomato sauce, and fresh lemon wedges. He eagerly tastes the white sauce, noticing how perfectly it pairs with the crispy chicken. They continue eating with pleasure, their faces smeared with the delicious dish, and they enjoy everyone's company. The group gathers around the table, sharing fried chicken and enjoying light, cheerful camaraderie. While eating, they help each other wipe sauce from their faces and sleeves, doing so with playful care. She admires the culinary skill and enthusiastically praises the unique preparation of licked or meat in sweet and sour sauce, which enhances its flavor and beneficial properties. He thoughtfully recalls his journey and sincerely admits, the constant need to cook during adventures has brought him to perfection in these recipes. They advise, with such talent, he should open his own establishment, but he remains humble and does not boast about his unconventional methods. He carefully pours a rich dark sauce in a thin stream over the perfectly fried meat, and the appetizing aroma rises as if greeting him. Enjoying every bite, he notes that the ingredients are already wonderful, but the dish would be even better with good sake. Nearby, his friends watch with laughter and say that for such a build, he truly has an insatiable appetite. Visitors exchanged surprised glances and admitted that they had never seen him eat so much before. Shrugging off the remark, he said that when the food is so delicious, one can definitely afford to indulge. Then he presents his new creation, a toasted rice ball that piques the curiosity of those gathered at the table. With a confident smile, he ladles steaming, aromatic broth directly onto the toasted rice ball. He tells them to take spoons and break it apart so the rice absorbs the broth and every bite is perfect. He watches as his companions enjoy the dish, their faces glowing with genuine pleasure from the flavors he created. They are delighted by the deep flavor of the toasted rice balls, noting how the seasoning wonderfully enhances the warm aromatic soup. After the main course, he announces that dessert is next, walks to the pantry, takes ingredients from the cooling chamber he manages, and carefully begins to serve, neatly placing the previously chilled pudding and decorating it with a bright mix of fresh fruits. Carefully and precisely, he places a scoop of homemade milk cream ice cream, feeling it is slightly icy as he sets it next to the pudding. He finishes the presentation by drizzling rich cranberry sauce on top in a thin stream and crowns the dish with one perfect cherry. Showing his final creation, he unveils the beautifully served pudding, decorated with ice cream and fruits, ready for his guests to enjoy. They stand still before the elegant dessert, enveloped in the scent of vanilla, barely believing that such a delicacy can be found on their travels. He says that although the process is tedious, with a freezer everything is possible, and adds that vanilla pods were previously given to him as a gift. In response, his comrades sincerely thank him, and he simply smiles and insists don't worry about the efforts put into preparing the food. The rarity of the ingredients is felt immediately. Vanilla pods are so expensive and available only to the nobility that they are almost never seen in ordinary markets. They are traded by weight and for gold. Staring at the dessert, they froze with realization. Before them was a luxurious delicacy made from ingredients inaccessible to ordinary people. He gently nudges them eat before the ice cream melts. Set aside thoughts about how much the ingredients cost and just enjoy the aroma and taste. The guests held their breath and with wide-open eyes looked at the dessert on the plate, admiring its wonderful presentation with delight. One of them hesitantly tries the pudding, marveling at its unusual, trembling texture and the pleasant aroma filling the air. As soon as everyone starts eating, the room fills with genuine joy. Their faces shine as they savor the sweets of the tree. They exchanged a moment of sincere gratitude, feeling how much work was put into preparing this delicacy for them. He explains that the ingredients were gathered from nature, gladly shares this generosity with them, but gently warns not to touch others' portions. They savor the cold, sweet delicacy, their faces soften as soon as the flavor unfolds. Astonished by the quality, they admire his unexpected skill in creating such an exquisite dessert. She thoughtfully examines the texture. It melts in the mouth so easily, and she really wishes she had that magical cold box from the capital to preserve such treats. He admits that although his life was once about adventures, he did try making ice cream and it greatly pleased them. She glanced toward the warehouse and decisively said that she was going to stock up on these frozen products, and asked if anything else was needed. He encourages her and says, if that means more ice cream, he will gladly give all the necessary magic stones. He assures the group, if they manage to find the needed ingredients in the forest, he will gather them himself. In response, the girls enthusiastically offer their help, chatting and eagerly ready to start cooking. He smiles and promises to keep the supplies ready so they can come and eat whenever they want. While the conversation continues, others listen attentively, thinking about how to allocate the rooms in the suites. The boy asks if they can help get the materials, saying that everything needed can be easily obtained in the nearest town. He agrees, saying that such help would be invaluable, and suggests sending people to watch the shop and prevent any trouble. Meanwhile, the sorceress smiles and assures that if they have pudding, she will definitely come to enjoy it. The treat instantly disappears, leaving only an empty plate behind. Grant gratefully thanks for the food and says he is already quite full, while the young boy and Alicia listen with gratitude. He smiled and gratefully noted how quickly everyone settled into the new life, all thanks to the constant support of Kerch and Alicia. The boy carefully accepts the gift in apple pie, carefully packed so it wouldn't spoil, and sincerely thanks them for their kindness. Grand is about to set off and, tidying up the carriage, calls on others to be careful while he takes the visitors away. He promises the three girls their own treat, but insists they wait until the next day to enjoy it. Meanwhile, during dinner, the girls discuss the recent strange absence of Lat and notice a persistent smell of food that seems to follow her. She is silent, her face thoughtful, carefully considering the companion's remarks. The truth comes out. Lotta secretly visited Grand's house to eat together. This secret habit was noticed by those who track her magical signature. They exchanged knowing glances. Suspicions were confirmed when they realized their companion often visited this house. He suggested, since they were here, why not eat together, saying it would ease the tension a bit. They are surprised to notice how often these visits occurred and say that the trail of crumbs, or rather, the appetite itself, was impossible to ignore. She tries hard to justify her presence, explaining that the duties of the forest guardian require a lot of magical energy, which food helps to restore, but her words are met with skepticism. They reveal their true nature, assuring that despite their youthful appearance, they are actually much older than any human and are not children at all. He is stunned by their statement, and they insist as a sign of gratitude for the food to show the power of the descendants of the goddess. They decide to head to the field, impatiently eager to show him the true power of the forest guardian. He watches them with his eyes, turning their words over in his mind, and finally decides. Although they have a mysterious origin, they do not pose a threat to the forest and its inhabitants. He carefully watches as the strangers approach the edge of the field, and from them there is a barely perceptible unnatural energy. One of the guardians kneels, her face calm. She prepares to bless the land. In response to her touch, the earth bursts with life. Bright shoots break upward, leaving him stunned by the sudden abundant harvest. She turns to him with a playful smile and says that now it is her turn to show her unique gift. Holding a stubborn, sleeping seed in her palm, she explains that awakening it requires a great deal of magical power and natural blessing, and gently urges the life inside it to wake up. When she directs her power, the seed begins to stir, sprouting through the earth with a sudden, energetic jerk that catches him by surprise. She recognizes this plant as a rare specimen from the East and warns. Although it is poisonous, in its raw form it has unique properties. He looks at the jar of preserved fruit and suddenly realizes, if prepared correctly, soaked in alcohol or candied, the danger can be neutralized and turned into a delicacy. He says he knows about that fruit only theoretically, he has never seen it in person, so his companions curiously ask if he has ever been to those lands. She notices that the place where the fruit comes from has long disappeared from human maps and may exist only in the deepest, most hidden corners of the forest, like an elven village. Smiling with surprise, he admits that he knows it only in theory, but gladly offers to show the traditional way of preserving fruits in alcohol. They gathered under the sprawling branches of a tree and watch as the process begins. A sudden rhythmic sound and fruits immediately appear on the branches, rapidly ripening. One of the observers admires the beauty of the flowers, but is reminded that flowering and fruiting are simply the natural order of the forest. A playful dispute flared up among the company whether to pick the fruit unripe or wait until it is fully ripe to get the best infusion. And one of the friends jokes that in fact everyone is simply driven by the desire to drink. He thoughtfully examines the shades of taste and decides that the slightly sour unripe fruit refreshes more, while the ripe one gives a richer sweetness and denser texture. Curious glances immediately focused on him. His detailed knowledge of the fruit's taste sparked a flurry of questions from his companions. They impatiently await the drink he is preparing, and one of the girls enthusiastically insists that now it is her turn to show her skills. She admits growing plants is difficult for her, but she managed to grow trees, and now she is preparing to show her creation. With a sudden flash of dazzling light, she summons her creation, and he remains stunned by the power of this phenomenon. The blinding glow slowly fades, revealing the figure of the creature she summoned from beneath the earth. A huge, toothy creature resembling a rose emerges, writhing with life, and she proudly introduces him to her companion Flora. She explains in a trembling voice that Flora is the spirit of a flower, which can move independently, and asks him to help protect her home. He listens as she details that the spirit feeds on the sun and magic, and notes that although it can scare, it is not actually aggressive but stands guard against uninvited guests. He watches fascinated as the flower spirit Flora hums with gentle energy. The girls say she is formidable enough to scare off weaker monsters if not provoked, and add that any uninvited guests can simply be handed over to him. Sighing, he recalls recent events of this period, and feels that after just one lunch the situation has become even more complicated. The conversation turns to the future. The girls say with smiles that they want to help in the fields and cannot wait to taste his dishes again, while Flora stands nearby quiet and vigilant. When the group was preparing to part, he waved goodbye and thought that dining under the stars is sometimes quite nice. Returning home, he imagined a larger table that could fit everyone, and decided to discuss it with Abel when he returns. He was torn from his thoughts by a sudden, frightening appearance, but quickly realized the creature did not pose an immediate threat. The next day the sky is clear and pleasant, and even the carnivorous plant Vronia seems to smile in the morning light. He notes Abel has gone to the royal capital, so the day belongs to him alone. Resolutely he decided, before going anywhere, to prepare a gift with his own hands. He gathers ingredients: flour, salt, yeast from slimes fed on apples, and fresh vegetables ready to start kneading his special pizza dough. With experienced hands, he kneads the mixture until it comes together into a smooth, solid ball. He continues to press and knead the dough, fully focused on achieving the perfect consistency. While the dough rests, he takes on the sauce, skillfully mincing garlic and onions, then slicing juicy tomatoes, frying this aromatic mixture, adding tomatoes, and simmering the sauce until it thickens to the ideal density, and his culinary creation is ready. He carefully spreads out the dough, generously coats it with thick tomato sauce, and places thick slices of salami, ensuring every detail is perfect. Nodding with satisfaction, he sprinkles the last layer of cheese on top, feeling confident in his creation. He carefully slides the finished pizza into the heated oven. The warmth hits his face. The flame dances in the stone hearth, and he eagerly waits for the food to be ready. The smell of bubbling cheese and brown crust fills the air, a sign that the masterpiece is finally ready. He lifts the steaming slice. His eyes widen as he takes the first bite, instantly overwhelmed by a powerful, spicy flavor. Though his tongue burns from the heat, he cannot stop eating. The melted cheese and sauce simply won't let him rest. He savors the toasted edges and the perfect harmony of ingredients, and decides that this homemade dish is true perfection. He claps his hands, pleased with what he has created, but part of him secretly wanted to keep it all to himself. Full and satisfied, he pondered what culinary experiment to try next, maybe something with seafood. Soon he reached his goal and stepped into a quiet, shaded forest to continue his journey. He paused, focused his energy, and activated the body enhancement skill, but he was instantly drawn to a strange, unfamiliar presence in the air. He cautiously made his way through the dense thickets, peering into the shadows to find the source of the noise. He knelt down by a quiet body of water, activated the scouting skill, and scanned the surroundings for the slightest sign of life. Ahead, he sensed a bunch of small presences that were completely different from the molebees he had encountered before, and possibly even larger. He realized he had stumbled upon the lair of mole monsters, and feeling the urgency, prepared to move forward. He advanced deeper into the cave and noticed the passage narrowing significantly. Broken branches suggested that something much larger than a mole beast had passed through here, which he had not expected. Examining the plan, he understood that the path was deliberately left wide so that larger creatures could pass, and he wondered if these tunnels were carved specifically to facilitate their movement. Suddenly, a sharp electric tingling ran down his arm, and he jerked back in surprise. His body responded to an invisible impulse. He gasped, his heart pounding, suddenly realizing he had barely avoided a trap, and adrenaline sharpened all his senses. Straightening up, he focused on the path ahead, knowing he had to rely only on his instincts and trained body to get through this dangerous terrain. He whispered to himself the main rule: avoid direct contact and stay calm, and then these dangers can be avoided. Moving with calculated precision, he maneuvered through the treacherous terrain, barely dodging the viscous, flowing substance that threatened to entangle him. He freezes, wipes the sweat from his forehead, and looks intently at that liquid, and with relief mixed with surprise realizes it's just water. He focused his energy, activated the enhancement of his whole body, and prepared to withstand the approaching threat. As adrenaline rose, he couldn't help but wonder if he was really needed here, and suddenly a heavy longing for home comfort overwhelmed him. Suddenly it dawned on him that the source of the snake's appearance was right ahead. Looking into the darkness, he finally noticed it. Although he did not know exactly what kind of creature it was, he felt the safety of the moles was above all and required his immediate intervention. Caring for their safety, he rushed forward and grabbed the snake to pull it away from the one it intended to bite. The beast instantly retaliated, its huge jaws, with lethal intent, lunged at him. He did not retreat, with a grim smile, noting that the creature turned out to be amazingly resilient. When he was face to face with the snake, he realized with horror that the snake's fangs were covered with deadly poison and had to parry with desperate precision. He plunges his blade deep into the snake and finally kills it. The creature collapses in the dim tunnel. Having neutralized the threat, he sighs with relief and pushes the carcass aside, clearing the way forward. The mole beast approaches, filled with immense gratitude for his timely intervention, and confirms that he fulfilled their prior agreement. He laughed heartily, brushing off the danger, sighed with relief the tunnels survived, and his companion avoided this chaos. Their eyes fell on the gathered supplies, plenty of rockfowl meat and black buffalo honey and salt. He begins to estimate the value of their loot, and suggests that trading with the dwarves will bring much more than selling it elsewhere. Molybus doubted, is such trade possible if they also have to transport goods from a neighboring town, and this made him think about the extra effort. He listens carefully as his companion insists, One must count the labor and time spent, not just the price of things. This is the same advice Kerch gave earlier. He explains to his companion that he will raise the price a bit on hard-to-get items to cover the work, and adds that it is still much cheaper than buying from the dwarves. The molebeast glows with joy, raising cookies, apple pie, and pizza, exclaiming that he has heard legends about such treats from the surface. After the first successful deal, he thoughtfully reflected on his experience and sincerely hoped that future encounters with creatures would go without dangerous monsters. Grant enters the shop with a smile, greets others, and holds a fresh batch of potions ready to start the workday. The shop workers greeted him warmly, joyfully glad of his arrival, and he asked if anything special had happened. Grateful for recent help, they handed him a gift from the shop, a mysterious device. The device turned out to be an automatic lighting system made especially for slimes, and he could not hide his surprise and admiration. She explains that the device uses light stones that imitate sunlight, so the slimes receive constant care even when there is no natural light. Because the physical properties of the slimes change depending on how much sun they get, such a controlled environment is vital for their health. Slimes essentially perform photosynthesis. They breathe and react to light just like plants. It is known that these creatures behave like plant monsters. Their activity cycles are governed by light, although the biological mechanisms of this phenomenon remain a mystery to the world. He sadly realizes the weaknesses of his slimes. They used to need sunlight and helplessly suffered from the whims of weather and night. To bypass this, he installed a special lamp on magical light stones. Now the slimes always bathe in the same glow, regardless of the time of day. But these stones are rare and expensive. They are wildly sought after and valued for their unique properties compared to other magical artifacts. Because a much larger magical stone is needed to reproduce the full intensity of natural sunlight, the equipment is still very expensive. While he is examining the device, a boy approaches him and extends an item as a gift, but he hesitates at first to accept such generosity. The boy insists, explaining that it is a token of gratitude from the shop for his help with selling potions, and categorically refuses any payment. He is overwhelmed by this kindness and says he has already received too much, but the boy just smiles and dispels his anxiety. The boy and the woman stand nearby and say once again that this gift is just a small thank you for the support he gave them, and their sincerity deeply moves him. He listens attentively as the woman and the boy explain that the gift is merely a token of gratitude from their relative's shop, and they insist that he accept it without hesitation. With a warm smile accepting their kindness, he agrees to take the item, sincerely acknowledging their generosity. The conversation changed when he recalled that he had previously told the woman about his interest in slimes, and this was the reason for her caring gesture. They remembered that the mage also recommended this very tool, saying he advised it with his own needs in mind. He thought to himself that although the wizard truly understands his passion for slimes, the process of raising them brings him genuine joy. Recalling his past life, he compares the present reality with those fictional creatures he once knew. He notices that slimes in this world are completely different, unique, sometimes troublesome, and even strange. Walking through the city, he realizes that these creatures, once only figments of his imagination, have become an integral part of his daily life. He carefully observes the slimes, noticing how they absorb the properties of what they eat, and this causes unpredictable and fascinating changes in their form and behavior. He watches this living process. What the slime absorbs either merges into its essence or is expelled as waste, and it can split and give birth to new independent beings without the memories of the predecessor. Although the creature has a magical stone at its core, he notices that the slime jelly is much more valuable and in higher demand. He understands, as long as the core is intact, the jelly will regenerate over time so it can be harvested again and again. This jelly can be used raw or dried and ground into fine powder, and it will be useful in cooking, alchemy, blacksmithing, and even tailoring. They devour almost everything, so he sees how they are used for garbage cleaning. This is already a common thing even in ordinary homes. These domestic slimes are often collected by professionals and turned into powder for fields, a vital source of fertilizer. He runs Abel's words about those special academies studying these creatures through his mind once again. But as a commoner, he feels such education is beyond his reach. Though not easy, he understands. Slime powder has become insanely popular. Even those who know nothing about it can now easily grow them. He watches with fascination as slime jelly from slimes fed only apples dries and turns into powder, noticing its potential as a bread leavening agent. Then this substance is dissolved in water, and immediately a method comes to mind, by which they made Jews for the merchant Reincarnated. He does not stop experimenting, applying decomposition skills to the lightning element slime, and relying on memories from a past life, successfully separated crystals with a white soul. To further refine the materials, he carefully places the jelly from the slime under direct sunlight, and patiently waits for it to dry into a fine powder. He recalls with anxiety the dangers of his experiments, Once the lightning element slime, coming into contact with salt, accidentally produced an extremely poisonous gas. In the basement laboratory, he keeps several slimes each grown for a specific purpose, so they satisfy his various needs. The space has turned into an improvised research laboratory, filled with everything needed for his current experiments. He sincerely rejoices when using knowledge from a past life, carefully combining decomposition and composition skills to discover new possibilities without crossing his limits. He sighed, hugged the slime to his hands, and noticed that their number was increasing again. She watched and could not understand. Does he really need to constantly increase their population, while he explained that he needed more tanks and bottles from the capital? He justified his actions, insisting that someday they would be useful to him, and she categorically insisted that he had already overdone it. She continued to say how hard it was for her to cope with such a number of creatures, and for a moment he was left speechless. Her attention focused on the dark slime in the corner, and he explained that it was fed with nitromandric, a plant that explodes on impact. He calmed her down, slightly adjusted the water content, and it did not explode under pressure. She anxiously realized the consequence. Might it simply explode like gunpowder if ignited? He confirmed her suspicion, showing how the slimy jelly can be soaked into a piece of fabric and dried, resulting in a convenient fire starter. He thoughtfully reflects. His latest discovery is impractical. Nitromagnetic really ignites fire wonderfully, but the rarity of the plant and the need for special storage make mass production a real logistical nightmare. His companion immediately intervenes, begging him to abandon the reckless idea of growing such unpredictable and dangerous plants in their garden. She sighed in despair and pleaded with him to stop these dangerous experiments, and he, completely unmoved, only shrugged lightly, dismissing her concerns. The conversation suddenly breaks off. He opens the status menu and recoils in horror. A strange new title unexpectedly appears before him. He looks at the screen with distrust, not understanding what the title Slime Alchemist means and where the mysterious category of monster-raising skills came from. She, noticing his confusion, smiles and says that his constant experiments with slimes are already on the verge of alchemy, while he, though surrounded by his collection of slimes, quietly complains that he lacks a more impressive title. The forest guardian meets another day. His habits are as constant as the dawn. He sneaks through the morning fog, devoted to a single goal: to preserve the peace of this forest. Long ago, an unbreakable agreement was made between the forest inhabitants and the people who settled nearby. He still faithfully adheres to it. The laws of the forest are indisputable. Those who respect the boundaries live in harmony, and those who violate the natural order must be removed. Protecting three sisters who live in his domain, he noticed that more people appeared near the edge of the forest. Among them stood out a young man named Grasp. Small creatures often bring him gifts from the forest, berries and fruits, which he accepts because it is his duty to care for and feed those he protects. He discovered that these gifts taste best when he shares them with his grandmother, whose culinary skills have become a pleasant addition to his life. The guardian recalled a recent encounter when a mountain goat challenged Grasp, but the young man completely defeated it. He watches the mountain goat and cannot help but notice. Once prone to fights, the creature became strangely docile after Grasp broke its horn. The young man thinks of the goat as a tasty dish, saying it would make an excellent meal, while the goat looks back as if it still remembers the humiliation from the broken horn. He thoughtfully examines the nature of the beast, a hybrid of a mountain goat and a forest spirit. Its mixed blood keeps it small and pushes it into aggressive poses to test its own strength. The goat suddenly lunges forward, hooves striking the ground, and it tries to hit him with its horns in a burst of new audacity. He easily dodges the attack and, smiling, notes what a persistent and irritating character that creature has. The young man decisively warns the beast to retreat, gesturing toward the dangerous mushrooms nearby. Their spores, if inhaled, cause uncontrollable laughter. As the creature retreats into the distance, he absent-mindedly thinks about blessing it but feels that it has already disappeared from sight. He decides that the goat will manage on its own. Its resilient nature and the blood of the forest spirit will eventually restore the broken horn. He freezes in front of a rural wooden building, holding a small curious creature in his hands, preparing to enter. Inside, he is sternly reprimanded and firmly warned. Quickly get rid of those volatile plants that release gas and that you brought before they cause trouble. With a broad smile, he pulls out his findings, pleased that he was able to find what he was looking for. He examines the Polarcho liqueur and notes. Although in its raw, pungent form it is hard to drink, it serves as a powerful base for further refinement. He weighs the practicality of his craft and decides, why waste coins on expensive honey when you can manage with more affordable spirits and achieve the goal? He explains how this drink is aged. Although it takes months, by mixing in fruits and sweeteners, it is easy to mask its sharp, still raw harshness. He turns his gaze to the reun berries and instantly understands. They are the perfect ingredient for his current potion. He sees a slimy creature devouring the raw material for sugar crystals and immediately realizes, with its help, he can obtain the necessary ingredients for his potion. He carefully examines the fruit of the polar chow and notices. Although the raw pulp is tasteless, its fibers can be transformed into a sponge-like material. This reminds him of plants he once cultivated in a previous life. He nodded contentedly, finished preparing the mixture, and was confident that this batch was ready for the next stage of refinement. His thoughts switched to the next goal: to find a substitute for pickled plums, a basic ingredient without which he believes his current project will fail. A mischievous idea flashed through his mind. He imagined Abel's expression when she tastes the sour mixture he is about to prepare. He sets out into the wild, determined to find red shiso, the main ingredient for the bright red hue he needs. Scanning the leaves, he recognizes a plant very similar to the shiso from his past, but notices, in fact, it is a medicinal herb karmic sign. He carefully collects samples. Green ones are more common, but it is the red that has the special properties he is seeking. He thoughtfully considers the benefits of these herbs. Their ability to cleanse the body and restore it is impressive, making them extremely valuable ingredients in his alchemical potions. He closely watches the cushion plants, notes their aggressive spreading, and wonders if harvesting would be easier if he grew them in his own garden. Suddenly, he was struck by the density of the foliage itself. He realized that such uncontrolled thickets could easily engulf the entire area. Thoughts involuntarily drift to the kitchen. Leaves and flower buds would probably make a tasty tempura. He begins to gather plants, deciding to take both red and green ones home to experiment with their flavors in the kitchen. Sorting through his finds, he recognized the herb Carmack cyan and, smiling at his luck, thought the season was already over, but he was fortunate to find it. He stops and angrily scolds himself. He got so absorbed in the task that he forgot to stay alert to his surroundings. The silence is broken when he suddenly notices a mysterious little creature darting through the nearby thickets. He looks intently, his gaze fixed on the strange, horned features of the creature emerging from the shadows. He looked distrustfully at the little horned creature, trying to remember if they had met before, while the creature playfully mocked his confusion. Worried about how suddenly the creature collapsed, he rushes forward to check if it is all right. He does not back down and insists on treating the creature's wounds, warning that ignoring them could lead to infection or worse, despite the creature's stubborn refusal of treatment. The creature recoils at the sight of his medical supplies and demands to know what he intends to do. He calmly explains that it is just medicine. He offers a small, sweet treat to soothe the creature and watches as it cautiously tries it with wide, curious eyes. As soon as he begins applying the medicine, the creature whines in pain, but he firmly tells it to endure the burning for the sake of healing. He continues to work with calm, confident hands, soothing the creature that the worst is already behind, and moves on to treat the wounds on his hand. The treatment is finished, and promising a treat at the end, he skillfully persuades the creature to cooperate. He carefully ties the last bandage on the creature, assuring it that the treatment is over, and gently reminding it of their agreement regarding the reward. Then he hands the creature a pair of protective gloves, kindly explaining that they will protect its skin from sharp branches and insect bites in the forest. The creature accepts the gift, and with a warm smile notes that although it usually forgets gloves, today it is very grateful for this gesture. Surprised by the sudden gift, the creature raised its eyes to him and aloud asked if it will ever grow as tall as its companion. He smiles and explains that although he is not entirely sure how this species develops, humans experience a rapid growth spurt during the transition to adulthood. He continued, advising that if the creature wants to grow big, it needs to eat well, move, and rest a lot, and the parents' genes also play a role here. It seems the creature has decisively decided to follow this advice, although it gets a bit annoyed when he treats it like a child, insisting that it will still grow up and become impressive. With a final passionate declaration, the creature swears not to forget his kindness and assures that the reward he promised is well deserved. The little creature dashed away, cheerfully waving goodbye, and he stood watching it with a knowing smile, thinking that with such restless energy their paths will surely cross again soon. Stretching, he decided to grab a few more pillows before finally going home, satisfied that another task was successfully completed. Gran sits amid a pile of gathered fruits, sighing heavily at how much work is still ahead, and mutters to himself because the very thought of processing seems extremely boring to him. He has already started preserving the fruits of Rion in different ways, filling jars with syrup and preparing batches of marinades so that nothing goes to waste. The ingredients were gathered in the forest just yesterday, and he hoped that simply soaking the fruits would be enough to finish the job. But the reality of the work makes itself known. He has to carefully wash, dry, and prepare each item separately, and each time it exhausts him more and more. When he was barely managing, 3 girls appeared and gladly announced that they had finished their tasks and were now ready to help him, to his great relief. Filled with gratitude, he sincerely thanks them and promises to repay them by preparing a delicious lunch as a reward for their hard work. They gathered around him asking about the menu, and he smiles and says that the dish will be ready in a moment. He shows fresh fish and says that he is going to fry it in oil. The girls immediately became interested and bombarded him with questions about the dish. He first prepares the base, pouring fragrant vegetable oil into a deep pan, which gently reminds him of olive oil from his past life. With skillful hands, he adds rosemary to the oil so that it becomes infused with aroma, then carefully cuts the fish into bite-sized pieces and gently immerses them. The pan is placed on low heat, and the fish gently simmers until its flesh becomes perfectly opaque white. As soon as everything is ready, he sprinkles the mixture with a pinch of salt, then pours cooled oil into the jar, and the preservation process is complete. He notices that storing fish in oil is incredibly convenient. It is always at hand and ready to immediately become part of the next dish. The aroma of Lin spreads through the room, mixing canned fish with mayonnaise and generously spreading it on bread, while the guests watch eagerly. Ready tuna sandwiches were placed before them, and three young women opened their eyes wide with delight. In unison with joyful thanks, they finally start on the dish he prepared for them. They devour the sandwiches with unrestrained enthusiasm. Their faces glow with each bite of this delicious dish. Between bites, they excitedly talk about how incredible this food is, jokingly confessing that they could never return to life without such treats. He joins them, grabs his sandwich, and smiles as he watches them sincerely enjoy what he prepared. The young man emphasized the perfect harmony of tuna, mayonnaise, and salad, and the guests immediately, impatiently clamored for seconds. When the food ran out, they leaned back full and satisfied, and he, clearing the table, noticed that his portion was already eaten. They tease him for hiding such tasty food from others and laugh at the mere thought of what would happen if someone found out. Having eaten their fill, they sincerely thank him for the meal and promise to return soon. He sincerely thanks them for helping to finish the task so quickly, then turns his attention to the next task, making wine from rion and dried rion. He thoughtfully examines the craft of reunion wine. The fruits are simple, but sugar in this world is so expensive that the whole process seems like a luxury compared to his past life. Carefully and precisely, he generously pours polarch liqueur over the rion fruit, adding a bit of honey to enrich the mixture. He explains the patience required to keep the jar in a cool, dark place and occasionally shake it during the first 2 weeks so the honey dissolves, although he admits he is tempted to try the finished product. Aging is a true test of time. Although it can be tasted after 3 months, he knows that if one endures and waits 6 months to a year, the flavors will develop much deeper and transform it into a versatile product, dessert, jam, or seasoning. He thoughtfully looked at the rock sugar crystals from the slimes. His heart filled with gratitude. There were enough for his needs, and he did not expect such generosity. He starts the second batch, alternately placing rion fruits and sugar crystals, and decides to let them ripen naturally, not relying on his preservation skills. The jars are sealed, and he rhythmically rattles them, already eagerly awaiting the comparison between the honey and sugar versions. The wine preparation is complete, and he immediately begins the next task, drying the rion fruits. He continues working carefully, layer by layer, placing rion fruits with salt into the jar, feeling the delicate balance on which the success of preservation depends. When adjusting the amount of salt, he notes, although he wants to reduce it, a certain dose must be maintained. Only then will everything be preserved for a long time and not spoil. As soon as the jar is filled, he covers it with a heavy lid and settles on top, explaining that such pressing is necessary for a week-long maturation. Then he takes the kamikachen leaves, thoroughly washing them to remove bitterness before using them in preparation. Carefully removing the sharp juices from the leaves, he ensures that the finished dried fruits have a much more refined and pleasant color. Observing the development, he smiles, satisfied that the fruit grows exactly as he intended. The weight of the lid successfully pressed down the fruit, and the brown transparent liquid rion vinegar gathered at the top. He carefully separates some of the fruits for drying, then uses a ladle to adjust the liquid level and adds the prepared leaves, completing the pickling. He pours rion vinegar over the fruits, ensures they are fully submerged, and tightly seals the ceramic jar. He notes that the mixture should stand for half a month and marvels at how his preservation skills make the process incredibly effective. When the first canning is finished, he takes the remaining fruits and decides to mix them with honey, imagining how the natural sweetness of honey will perfectly complement the sharp sourness of rion. He goes outside and carefully surveys the surroundings, looking for the perfect spot for the final stage of his work. Having found a suitable place, he sets the rion out to dry and admires their bright red color, counting that 3 more sunny days and everything will be dry, so he will be ready for the arrival of Abel and others. Grant tastes a piece of the canned fruit. His face instantly contorts as the sharp, pungent sourness hits his palate. He jokes about how his diet affects his health, agrees that he probably should use less salt, but before the temptation of tasty pickled plum, he simply cannot resist. The young man thoughtfully reflects on his preparation, noting that returning the fruits to the vinegar bath allows the flavors to soften and the acidity to deepen over time. His concentration is broken by a sudden, persistent push. He turns and sees a creature insistently demanding his attention. He gently explains to the monster that these treats are a special mixture of rion fruits and kamikachen leaves, pickled together to reveal a unique flavor. Sliding a piece to the creature, he smiles and watches as it greedily devours the treat, clearly satisfied with the result of his experiment. Continuing to offer treats, Abel approaches him and inquisitively asks about his secret snacks, and he calmly invites her to try his creation herself. She carefully examines the dried fruit of Ryun, notices its powerful restorative properties, and at the same time marvels at such an intense flavor. He replies edible but warns, due to high acidity and strong restorative effect, it should not be overused. She admits that the fruit cleared her mind and relieved fatigue, and asks if others have already tasted it. He advises to remove the large pit before eating for convenience, and hands her another piece. She accepts the offer, her face softens, and she prepares to taste the fruit again. When she bit the fruit, a sharp, piercing taste struck her face, instantly twisted in a sudden, involuntary reaction. Others watch with smiles as she tries hard to keep calm before the unbearable sourness. She watches her reaction with a satisfied half-smile, pleased to see how her usually restrained behavior cracks. He smiles with a cunning gleam in his eyes, clearly enjoying the chaos he himself caused. The sorceress pondered. Although she had lived a long life, she had never before seen such a strange way to eat a fruit that truly washed away the fatigue of the day. She sincerely thanks for the gift, and says that this rare item is the perfect token of gratitude for the received help. They explain the consequences of the incident. The mushroom spores caused uncontrollable laughter, leaving the trio helpless until they were finally rescued by young visitors. They sit next to each other in a quiet room. The tension from the recent experience slowly melts away, leaving a quiet, shared moment of rest. He offers another piece of dried fruit, but she pulls back as if asking whether he really wants to test her even more with this overly intense flavor. He smiles to himself. If the fruit is left longer, the acidity will only sharpen, and at this thought, a satisfied smile appears on his face. She reaches out, grabs the fruit from him, demands that he calm down, and indignantly complains about the audacity of his antics. She leans closer, looks into the jar with lively curiosity, and asks if it is sour, to which she is told that the honey-soaked everything balances it out. Her gaze caught on the display that detailed the properties of the Ryun fruits. It noted their rarity as S-rank and that they restore endurance and relieve mental fatigue. She carefully examines the fruit and learns that it is salted before being preserved, and Hanitha's method gives it its unique taste. The conversation shifted to the variety of preparations. She compared types, noting that some are sour while others tend toward a sweeter taste. He intervenes and says, "The mushrooms that previously caused laughter were brought by a rat thighs is not the same as the current delicacies." She cautiously takes a bite. The taste is mysterious but invigorating, and in a moment a surge of energy spreads through her. Recalling the intensity of the dried Ryun, she warns, "Its power is so overwhelming that it must be handled with extreme care." She ends the conversation with a question, is such a strong acidity really necessary? And he explains that nothing sweet is deliberately added to this batch. She passionately tells the group, although the fruit has natural sweetness, it is precisely the saltiness and acidity that dominate it. Noticing her hesitation, one of the girls suggests taking the fruit if she and the others do not want to eat it. Intrigued by the offer, he immediately interrupted and insisted that he would taste it himself. Without hesitation, he instantly put the small berry into his mouth. The taste simply hooks him. He says the previous one was rich, and this one has a much milder acidity. Suddenly she was overcome with irritation. She demanded to know why he did not immediately offer this more pleasant version, and he shyly apologized. He brushed off the tension and with a smile said he would start preparing dinner with the Ryun fruit. As he walked away, he smiled and reassured, "There is no need to worry about the effect of the fruit, trust my decision." He approaches the table with a tray of food and joyfully announces that dinner is finally ready. On the table is a generous treat, meat rolls and various side dishes prepared from those unique ingredients we talked about earlier. They gather around the table, notice the unusual appearance of the tonkatsu, and agree to eat it while it is still fresh and hot. Thanking in unison, the group immediately started eating, and anticipation lit up their faces. She took a bite, enjoying the flavor, and said that his dishes never cease to impress. While chewing, she feels a distinct pleasant acidity that adds unexpected depth to the dish. He explains the secret. The meat is wrapped around a dried Ryun fruit, which gives that sharp, refreshing accent that cuts through the pork's fattiness. Curiosity was off the charts. They ask about the red seasoning on the rice, and he replies it is a mixture of crushed, dried karm action and riyad. He watches contentedly as the guests greedily eat the dish, their faces brightening from the pleasant aroma and perfect balance of salty and sour. One of them stops, interested in the ingredients, and explains that it is tempura made from stems, flowers, and leaves of resection, asking her to trust and take a bite. He smiles, seeing her enjoy the dish. He is so pleased that his kitchen experiment was so well received. They continue eating, and when one of the girls asks for a drink, he serves a refreshing sparkling beverage that perfectly complements the flavor of the dishes. Then he turns his attention back to his bowl, ready to savor the fruits of his labor. He prepares to eat. One of the women asks if he will really eat that portion, but he remains focused, enjoying the unique combination of ingredients. He closes his eyes, enjoying how the tartness and saltiness perfectly combine with the natural sweetness of the rice. With each bite, his appetite grows stronger, and he continues eating with sincere pleasure, fully immersed in the dish he prepared himself. He offers others to try his dish, and they can't believe their eyes. He is truly savoring it, and they say how delicious it is. While others hesitate, he smiles, confident that later they will appreciate the special flavors he prepared, and he sincerely enjoys them himself. Grand hands the buyer a small bottle. The buyer beams with excitement over the new manicure product, and Grand smiles in response, grateful for the successful sale as the shop flourishes. Finally, the day has come to restock. The shelves of the old-fashioned store crates are pushed into place to satisfy the growing demand. The rumor about this manicure product quickly spread among local women, all thanks to the recommendations of those who first tried it at the festival. He remembers the day when a young woman entered the shop and asked to pick a nail polish to match the hand cream, and this exactly prompted his inventors toward a new idea. Since then, he began offering, painting nails and drawing simple patterns for clients, and this gesture was met with great gratitude. The polish itself is a true alchemical wonder, made from mucus jelly, troll fat, and dyes from flower petals, a recipe he honed through long experimentation. The polish must be applied with jeweler's precision, especially with that tiny brush attached to the inner lid, making it so compact is still not easy. He still personally reworks the potion bottles, but the demand is so crazy that stocks often sell out before noon. He calculates how to conduct trade most conveniently. If clients bring their empty jars, he can sell lacquer at a discount and still not deplete his stock. Seeking a more reliable solution, he writes a letter to Abel, hoping she can negotiate with the royal merchants and secure a steady supply of containers. Throughout the day, he explains to visitors that the lacquer is already sold out, but notices that interest in custom manicures is only growing. He turns his attention to a client and carefully paints her nails with thin patterns for 5 silver coins. Thinking about his past life, he wonders if such specialized manicure salons were common, and feels comforted by the familiar craft. At first, he did not believe in his artistic abilities, but admits that natural dexterity, honed by practice, made the work surprisingly manageable. The client sincerely thanks him for his attentive, careful work. She beams with joy, and is clearly delighted by how her hands have transformed. Smiling contentedly, he prepares for the next task, confident in the chosen path. He proudly shows his work and watches with a smile as his companion genuinely rejoices at the result. She walks away, and he waves cheerfully, the air still filled with quiet satisfaction from a job well done. Returning to the station, he strikes up a warm conversation with the vendor, who smilingly notes that his presence consistently boosts their daily sales. The boy nearby beamed with excitement and impatiently asked him to come more often, especially since he promised to share a few culinary recipes. Seeing the boy's enthusiasm, he suggests taking a lunch break as soon as the flow of customers subsides a bit. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by heavy, confident footsteps. A new person is approaching the store entrance. The visitor burst in with a single purpose: to demand to buy the entire available stock of nail polishing potion. When he was told that the stock was exhausted, he noticeably became embarrassed, but instantly found a way out. He offered to reserve the entire next shipment for himself. He quietly but confidently explains that the potions are intended for his acquaintances, but the senior merchant remains skeptical and demands to know if he really created them. Despite the merchant's distrust, he is forced to sell his entire stock of nail care potions to that man's store. He explained that mass production is logistically impossible, special containers and brushes are difficult to make, and the merchant became noticeably irritated. The merchant offers to give only the liquid, but he firmly refuses, explaining that without the unique applicator, the product simply will not work. He does not give in, firmly stating that both the formula and the vessels are recorded in the Merchant Guild and cannot be transferred. The merchant grumbles indignantly, boasting that his firm is the elite of the capital, and puts a huge amount of money on the table to secure the deal. He does not budge and clearly says that he is a craftsman and is used to dealing only with equals. If the merchant wants to negotiate, he should bring his superiors to the table. With an unwavering gaze, he finally asks the merchant to state his name. This is a sign that the real negotiations are just beginning. He watched as the persistent merchant scattered, and his heart tightened when he realized that the man was already planning to return. Returning to the shop, he firmly closed the door, cutting off the tension of that encounter from himself. Inside, he calmed his comrades, promising to handle any future problems himself so they would no longer have to worry about such dishonest people. He insisted that they not carry this unpleasantness in their hearts and promised to watch the shop more carefully whenever he was nearby. The boy noticed that the merchant looked arrogant and thought that such people rarely negotiate honestly and fairly. He agreed and felt relieved that the man was sent away. His comrade added that such people usually bring about their own downfall. The conversation changed. They talked about a trip to the capital. The boys suggested going together on the next supply trip to scout the merchant's firm, although he warned that the road would be dangerous because of dragons. Leaving behind the stress of the day, he decided it was time to clear his head and finally enjoy a well-deserved meal. He sits at the table, curiously looking at the unfamiliar ingredients served to him, and is surprised to learn that it was gathered right from their own fields. The ingredient called kabori is a fruit with yellow pulp. When cooked, it breaks down into thin strands and becomes a perfect substitute for noodles. They prepare a dish from these strands and generously pour a rich meat sauce made from ground green dragon meat and tomatoes from their garden on top. As soon as the dish is ready, the company sits at the table and enjoys the fruits of their own garden with pleasure. They could not get enough. The rich meat sauce perfectly combines with the light, silky kabori noodles, making it simply impossible to stop. He feels that the sweetness of the tomatoes can rival the finest fruits, and the soup adds a refreshing balance to the dish. The group froze, fully immersed in the pleasure of the homemade feast. He finished the meal with a sip of soup, noting how the simple seasoning of rockbird broth perfectly cleanses the palate. He watches as the boy impatiently extends an empty plate and begs for another serving of this delicious dish, while the woman nearby sighs half amused, half resigned to his insatiable appetite. Laughing, he ladles another portion and says that such a reaction is the greatest joy for a cook, even though the supplies are disappearing before their eyes. The plate emptied in an instant, the metal fork clanged sharply against the ceramic as the last piece vanished. When the meal ended, he offered to leave the remaining ingredients so they could prepare the dish themselves whenever they wished. The boy noted that although the recipe is simple, obtaining the meat of the green drake and the broth from the rock bird is not easy at all. She smiles and complains that his cooking has spoiled their tastes, warning that now nothing less than such exquisite food will satisfy them. The murmur of the local tavern fills the air. People gather, unaware of the quiet meeting in the corner. He arrives late to the meeting, briefly apologizes, and settling in begins their underground affairs. She looks down at the table, her face serious, confirming that everyone has arrived and it's time to start. They began whispering, exchanging information. Their target was seen near a small town, probably drawn there by a recent monster investigation. He enjoys a plate of his favorite fried dish. His mood lightens, and meanwhile they continue discussing strategy. She wonders, what logic is there in a high-ranking adventurer lingering in such a peaceful, remote region, far from the usual dangers of forests or plains? She cannot shake the thought. Could the restricted access to the local territory and the existence of an uncharted forest be connected to the recent attacks? They assume that their target is likely investigating frequent monster appearances in these parts, and this hints at an even deeper mystery. She recalls seeing the target late at night in the royal capital together with his companion. Her companion is clearly shocked, almost dropping the device from her hands when she realizes what it means. The group bursts into excited whispers, joking that the official came to kill them. She continues the report, stating that the pair was spotted heading to the flower district, and reasons that after a fight it is quite natural for the man to seek such company. Embarrassed by the provocative hint, she quickly apologizes and insists that she is merely providing a professional service. She clearly states, their mission is only to observe from afar and not cause trouble, and to report all further appearances to the Royal Guild. The conversation abruptly changes when she reports that the person known as Kuroma has not been seen near the target recently. She adds that she recently came across the one they are looking for in the dungeon's rest area. He was just enjoying homemade bento. He suggests that once the guild's work begins, the target will most likely move to the tavern in the capital rather than stay in the dungeon. Shocked by what this means, they are genuinely touched by the thought of homemade bento brought into the dungeon. They decided to immediately record these findings and could not help but notice how absurd the situation is. The conversation does not die down. They speculate that he might even return to his parental home. A report arrives. Those who sneaked into his family's house saw no signs that he lives there, although he visits occasionally. He notes that if the target is often seen near PMOD, then he uses teleportation to get all the way to the capital. They are struck by the thought that the target probably lives with someone, and this takes their breath away. In a small town far from the capital, the target quietly lives with his companion. Their domestic life makes observers melt with emotion. They consider the consequences of their mission and realized the place where the target hides is not for random eyes. One of them suggested taking over the continuation of the guild's investigation, as their joint appearance could attract unwanted attention. Eventually, everyone agreed to move cautiously so that their inquiries remained unnoticed and did not cause a stir. The planning was completed. They clinked glasses to the success of future efforts, and this marked the end of the official briefing. A few days later, the scene shifted to a quiet town. A woman diligently prepared coffee, and the rhythmic grinding of beans filled the air. A call rang out, and a young man entered, asking for a table for one, but when he mentioned a companion, the woman was taken aback. He settled in, explaining that he had come from a distant land and was eager to drink a cup of coffee. So the woman immediately asked if it was his first time tasting their coffee. She warmly welcomed him to the cafe, slid the menu over with a polite smile, and he sincerely thanked her for the hospitality. He sat at the counter, and his presence suddenly made the woman blush nervously. She barely restrained herself from getting flustered. Frightened by the unexpected request, she stammered in response, and under his intense gaze, her face reddened even more. He orders coffee and a sandwich, politely asking which type of coffee she preferred. The young man dreamily spoke aloud about his taste. He could endure bitterness, of course, but preferred something milder and more aromatic. She gently nodded and promised to make the drink exactly as he liked. In a moment she returned, pouring steaming coffee into his cup with refined grace while he watched the dark liquid swirl. He swallowed and smiled sincerely, indicating that the taste was simply perfect, and she responded with a modest, relieved smile. She smiled and told him that refills were free up to 3 times, inviting him to relax and enjoy the food. He sat quietly, savoring the realization that the coffee he was drinking was truly made by the owner herself, and this moment seemed almost unreal. Having asked for a refill, he watched as she gracefully took the order and promised to return soon with a new cup. After a moment, she returned with a steaming cup, and he sincerely thanked her for her attentiveness. He looked thoughtfully at the espresso, and she began enthusiastically explaining the nuances of her brewing. Although she most often uses a siphon, she prepares the milk very carefully to complement the coffee's flavor. She passionately spoke about the sophistication of the siphon, admitting that although it requires more care, its delicate taste fully justifies all the effort. He listened attentively as she compared the features of filter coffee and espresso, her enthusiasm for the craft becoming increasingly evident, and he was a bit overwhelmed by her deep knowledge. He finished the drink to the bottom, thanked her for the excellent choice of beans, and smiled, saying that his friends would definitely appreciate their quality just as much as he did. As he was leaving, she, overwhelmed with excitement, could no longer wait, wanted to write down all the details of their conversation so others could read them.